All right, good evening, and welcome to the Monday, September 21st, 2020 regular business board meeting. I am Lucy Klein. I'm the Vice President of the Lower Merion Board of School Directors. I want to note that the attendance of all of the board members, except for President Gilbert, who is excused, and therefore I will be chairing tonight's meeting. This meeting is being made public, recorded, and live streamed via Zoom. The links that are posted in board docs and on the website calendar. All participants are muted, and there will be an opportunity and time allotted for public comment via the chat feature during the meeting. So I wanted to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us. If we are to look at one of the bright sides of COVID and Zoom world is the ability for a lot more people to engage and join our meetings. So welcome everyone. And I'm going to turn over to Mr. Copeland now.
Thank you, Mrs. Klein, and I apologize. I've had some technical difficulties here, so I'm not remotely or virtually joining everybody else in the boardroom, obviously. Before we get into this evening's presentations, and I'm mindful of Dr. Rubin's time, just some quick notes and reminders. First of all, while it hasn't been a perfect, and it's certainly been a different opening, just kudos to the staff and the support of the families and the participation of students in the virtual program that we've had so far this year. I've had an opportunity to get into some classrooms, both by walking through the buildings and stopping in some classrooms, and also the last couple of days having the opportunity to actually see students in the building, K-12, and able to greet some of them and see their teachers working, particularly with our special education classes. Just to bring us back to some things, and I mentioned this at the ISC meeting last week, the State of the District, some things that we know we have to get back to. When we broke in March, one of the things that we were looking to do was to, as we build our new 5-8 middle school, was to look at our entire 5-8 middle school program. We had a 5-8 middle school committee where participants were looking at how do we want to schedule, what new programs do we want to, how do we want to reimagine what the world of middle school students is. That got put on hold. We need to get back to that. Likewise, we had a K-4 committee meeting where we were going to take a look and say, well, what might we be able to do with a K-4 program now that we're going into that situation? That didn't even really get started. We want to get back to that. School start time is an issue that we've been looking at for the last several years, and we were about to send out some information. We need to get back to that. Along that vein, the board at their October Education Committee meeting is going to take up the concept of high schools as being in the second tier. There's been some real energy around wanting to do that. We haven't figured out who goes first or who goes third, but I think it's pretty well agreed that people want high schools to go first. That's going to require obviously some support in making sure that we have the facilities at Arnold Field that we need, but the board is going to take up a resolution on that in October. And then finally, in terms of steps going forward, we're going to need to take a look at that enrollment progression plan for the middle school. How are we going to enter that building? Is it going to be 5-6, 5-6-7, 5-6-8? We have to get back to that. Finally, we had originally advertised for some enhancements to our HVAC system with a bipolar ionization program. We're since rethinking the scope of that program. So even though it was advertised, that'll come back, but it'll come back at a reduced rate. So if somebody saw that advertised and we're not taking action tonight, that's why. So on with tonight's presentations. Again, I want to thank Dr. David Rubin for coming out. I'm going to let Terry, what's Terry's name? Terry Quinlan. I'm going to have Terry Quinlan introduce Dr. Rubin because she's been working closely with them throughout this program, wherever Terry is.
Here I am. Yes, thank you, Mr. Copeland. Dr. Rubin is the director of the Policy Lab at the Children's Hospital, Pennsylvania, and also the Population Center Innovation Lab there. He's also the director of that. The policy lab at SHOP works to advise people locally and nationally about different health policy. And most importantly for us, that has been around COVID. And they've got quite an extensive website and resources. And he's been assisting various school districts, the Pennsylvania Department of Education, Pennsylvania Department of Health. So we're pleased to have him here tonight to just do a brief presentation and to answer some questions about reopening. Although they're not specific to our plans, he can speak to COVID in general and safe reopening plans. Dr. Rubin?
Yeah, thanks for having me, everyone. It's I just want to start by just recognizing just the amount of anxiety that everyone is having as we are now 6 months into this, and everyone's tired, fatigued, trying to figure out how we kind of are going to get through the next few months, knowing that the vaccine's probably not going to be here in time, particularly for most of this school year. And over the summer, there was a lot of discussion about the guidance that came out from Policy Lab that really was, trying to identify what would be the best window to try to get our schools reopened after we had seen a lot of resurgence of the virus throughout the country, including some growing rates throughout the Mid-Atlantic region. We, to try to provide some flexibility to school districts, we provided a couple of different rates when we did that. We identified a very low incidence rate that was reflective of when Europe and Southeast Asia had reopened most of their schools, with the exception of a couple countries, because those were the only ones that had those rates were consistent with successful school reopenings in terms of identifying schools that did not have large outbreaks originating from the schools. It was also a very challenging summer because the data that was coming forth, particularly on transmission in kids, while it wasn't necessarily suggesting that there was more significant disease in children, it was clearly demonstrating that kids could transmit this infection and that outbreaks could originate from school settings. Now, we also identified, much less was talked about, but we also identified a second threshold, which was at about 35 cases per 100,000 per week, which was never meant to be a rigid guideline, but to sort of suggest that you could increase your thresholds and start with a more incremental reopening strategy for in-school instruction that would focus on younger children and children with special education needs who did not learn well virtually in the classroom, and to build confidence with your school reopening plans, particularly in those younger kids for whom we still believe there's a lower rate of symptomatic infection and less transmissibility than there are in the older kids, following the data that still continues to emerge to this day. Now, since that guidance, the most important part of that guidance was that an area needed to see stable or declining rates over time to be able to kind of see that window for reopening so that they could take advantage of the school plans and the safety plans that schools were developing, along with a lower community incidence to get off on the school year, particularly with a good start. It's easy to reopen schools. It's not so easy to keep them open. And we were most worried around the Labor Day holiday, around the college reopenings, around returning vacationers, that we might see a resurgence like we had seen. Maybe not the same like we saw Memorial Day and the 4th of July holiday, but clearly we were going to see some resurgence, and we saw that. And we actually even saw some upticks throughout the Mid-Atlantic region in late August. Certainly college reopenings have been difficult. We were well aware locally about the Temple reopening. St. Joe's has been a particular issue in Lower Merion in terms of some of the risks there. But fortunately, Villanova's reopening has gone much better. Certainly for those folks who are Penn State alumni or have friends at Penn State, they're really struggling out in Center County right now. And there are a lot of areas around the country that are struggling with their college reopenings. But just because they had a risk at the beginning did not mean they wouldn't settle down. And so we suspected, with warmer weather still on the horizon for a few weeks here in early September, that if we waited a couple weeks after Labor Day, let things settle out, we might get this second window. And I think that second window has arrived. Whether it's 35 or 50, or in some cases 60 cases per 100,000, I don't think we want to micromanage the numbers. The rates have been fairly stable here for a few weeks. We don't know how long this window is going to stay open. The Labor Day effects are in the rearview mirror. The fall effects are beginning, and they're being conferred by these college reopenings. They're being conferred by youth sports leagues, particularly non-scholastic sports leagues, in terms of how well they're doing a job in terms of spectators and mitigating risk in some of those travel leagues. They're being conferred by weekend gatherings and accelerated bar and restaurant reopenings. And these have been the challenges we have faced even back in the spring. But that said, we have a window to reopen right now, and we have additional data that helps us that since the guidance came out. The first was information that came from the children's hospitals late this summer after our guidance came out that tried to triangulate what the actual risk was in terms of the number of COVID positive kids and potentially staff that would return on day one to a district like Lower Merion that has 8,700 kids, I believe, in about 10 facilities or so, right? And so, when you think about it, what the children's hospitals have been doing since March has been testing kids before procedures for COVID because they didn't want to take COVID positive kids to the operating room. And so based on the amount of community incidents, we now have pretty good correlations as to what to expect. And basically, it's a factor of 10. If you're at let's say the Philadelphia region in general is at a rate of 50 per 100,000. I actually believe Lower Merion is closer to 30 to 40, or maybe even it's even lower, given the relative affluence of the Lower Merion area. But let's say we're at 50. Let's just be really conservative. You multiply that by a factor of 10, and it would be about 500 per 100,000, or 0.5%. And that has now been validated by testing that has been done at colleges, testing that's been done at private schools, data that I've had a chance to review in different venues, including some of our private schools in the region. And so if you take that number and you say, okay, we're at 50, and let's say we have 8,700 kids, that means maybe 40 or 45 kids might be positive on day one or spread across. If you're at 30, maybe it's closer to 25, 30. So any given building, particularly our elementary schools, may only have a few kids that are positive. And we should not expect, given the rates of community incidents that we're seeing, that there will be a time where we'll have zero. And we're having to accommodate to this new risk. And the question becomes, if you have 5 kids in your building that are positive and maybe a staff member, are your protocols and the ones that they're developing at Lower Merion strong enough with masking of people within the building, with distancing? And we've supported 6-foot distancing between desks, which have guided why a lot of places have had to go to hybrid plans, because they couldn't achieve that dedensification of the classrooms without going to a hybrid plan. Hygiene practices, and then really good surveillance. Parents are going to have to keep kids home. If they have the inkling that their kids are getting sick, the kids are staying home this year. And if we do all those things really well, and there's only a few kids who may be asymptomatic on day one, and everyone's wearing masks and distancing, you have this multi-layered public health intervention that has a lot of fail-safes to it. The strength comes from having multiple interventions occurring at once. And I believe in that setting, we can succeed at a place like Lower Merion. And I'm added to that some confidence from 2 anecdotes before we open it up to questions. One was from that salon in Missouri back in late spring when they started to reopen. I mentioned this to a lot of school districts. 2 of the salonists had active COVID infection when they opened these salons. They cared for about 140 clients in those salons. Everyone was masked. They were actually within 3 feet. They were even closer for 30, 40 minutes as people's hair was being done. None of the 140 people became infected. Just these past couple of weeks, there was, in the week before school, teachers at a private school in the region got together, about 200 teachers, for their orientations before the students arrived. One of the 200 tested positive a day later. They, just out of extra precaution, have been following and testing the other teachers in that cohort who all came in, but they were masked and distanced in the building. No one else was infected. Those types of data should add confidence to us that as we start to build these protocols, particularly at a time that we're probably at a nadir of our incidents, we don't know how long this window will last because of some of the risks I said before, but it should give us some confidence that we can do this, and we can do this successfully, beginning with younger children, and then getting our kids back, the rest of the kids back to the classroom, hopefully before it gets colder. And then hope that we get, some fortune that our community members, that we maintain a level of vigilance so that we don't have to revert to distance learning early and see the kind of transmission, like, for example, we're seeing in Wisconsin right now, which is a clear example of what we don't want to be as we head towards winter. So with that, the last thing I'll say is I remember back in March and April when our staff at CHOP was returning to school, returning to take care of patients, many of whom had been exposed to COVID. We were terrified. Our nurses were terrified. Our office staff was terrified. Imagine the mass transit workers felt the same way when they returned. But we built, through a lot of work, we built safety protocols, distancing our teams within our offices, wearing masks, moving patients through, and we have not seen transmission. And a couple of weeks, once you get over that fear of getting over that threshold, a couple of weeks in that doesn't mean that the risk is ever going to be zero. But you start to build confidence that these things actually work, that these protocols will work, and we have a lot of evidence of that now. And honestly, I feel safer when I go to work now than when I walk through the Ardmore Market. And so that's the way we want our families to feel when they send their kids to school. We want our teachers and our staff to feel that way. And with that, I'll open it up to questions, because I do think we have a window now to take advantage of as Lower Merion proceeds towards more in-school instruction.
Dr. Rubin, how much time do you have for us?
Whatever you need me for.
Okay, well then, Amy, what? I can't see my board president anymore. She's gone.
I'm here.
Do you want to go for the board and then the public?
Sure. If any board members have a question, if they want to raise their hand in the, Mr. Lee?
Thank you. And thanks, Dr. Rubin. I appreciate you taking the time to be here and help us guide us in making these tough choices. My question's about sports specifically, and I'll preface by saying I'm a strong supporter of sports, and my kids all play sports. But my understanding is that at the incidence and positivity rates that will allow us to reopen schools and for the sports team to engage in contests, the policy lab recommends that students not wear masks during exertion. Is that correct?
No, we never said that. I think so. What we actually handled the issues of sports separately from schools. So to me, the problem with the in-school instruction is the large groups of students congregating in hallways and then in classrooms. If you think of this from the aspect of moment of transmission, that we never imagined, even when there was distance learning, that there wouldn't be any activities, that we're not putting locks on the door, and that actually from a socio-emotional perspective, it's not just sports, but school activities, that there would be traffic in the building. And when you treat the sports teams, if you look at our sports guidance, we actually differentiate higher contact sports from lower contact sports. Those are outdoors versus indoors. And they each have their own level of risk, and we tried to provide some level of thresholds. So for example, I don't worry that much about our track athletes, right, who are maybe doing long distance running, and there's plenty of opportunities to come up with safety protocols that allow them to run, and then use a mask if they're in traffic, or not use a mask if they're running solo. And there's plenty more opportunities to be creative there. Our tennis teams, for example, our golf teams. But even in the medium risk, I think there's plenty of opportunities for team competition, for softball and baseball, for volleyball, because there are ways in which to do that. A lot of those sports are outdoors. Volleyball, you can actually wear masks while you're in competition. The challenge that you have with sports is when you get into the highest contact sports: basketball, football, wrestling, ice hockey. These have been really challenging. We know very clearly right now that they confer significant risk. And for those, I think you really have two options if those sports are important, because we're not reaching levels of test positivity below 1%. And the kind of really low transmission you need to do it safely without testing. If people want to engage in those types of sports, and this is not just scholastic sports, but I have real concern about these travel leagues. We've seen very significant hockey outbreaks. We've seen very significant football outbreaks already through the region. that the only way to safely resume contact sports is to institute a testing algorithm that's fairly routine and would come with some use of resources to be doing daily testing before athletes were to participate in any sort of scrimmages.
Okay, and just to follow up, for sports with moderate contact, let's say soccer or field hockey or sports like that, what's the recommendation for like games and contests?
Well, we wanted to, you're at the level of thresholds where you could do some contests. We've recommended regional competition. Like, I wanted, basically Harriton and the Lower Merion School District to have a really revved up rivalry this year. Maybe you can include Radnor, right? To try to keep it local. I think you have to do really good symptom surveillance if you don't have the testing available to you. There's already been at least one soccer outbreak in the region, but I think honestly it's lower risk from the sense that for the most part, there is some tracking. It is outside. It's not an indoor sport like basketball, but kids are often moving alone through the field. But it doesn't mean the risk is ever zero. And we also understand that soccer, is a significant exertion that it's not necessarily plausible to wear a mask. And so you just have to factor that in your level of risk tolerance as a school district as to how you do that. But I do think that soccer, as long as you're doing good symptom surveillance, and there are other methods of pledges and what they call quarantine, where the teams are actually making active commitments to keep their circles small, there's a level of trust that has to develop because you're removing the mask in the setting of team competition and trying to only maintain competitions at a rate that you think is safe enough. And we said that was below testing positivities of 5% and the kind of rates that you're at right now where you're opening schools.
Great. Thank you.
Ms. Ackerman?
Yes, and thank you so much, Dr. Rubin, for taking the time to be with us tonight. Based on your comments, I just wanted to get your thoughts about this, especially when you compared going to work at CHOP versus shopping at the Ardmore Farmers Market. So being in a place with a lot of management and protocols that you're expected to participate in versus one that's not, could you say, for the community, maybe this reopening and having kids be in person, social distance, part-time, and participating that way would be a way to kind of mitigate community spread, just because now they're in places that we know there's active management, there's not kids spread throughout perhaps pods and other child care centers, all over with different practices, and it may be easier to get the community used to these protocols for the long term by kind of going through this type of management. I just wanted to get your comments and thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, there is some value, I think, to the hypothesis that having them in school is a much more controlled situation than having them, throughout the community. I think those are obviously, you can't test those, but I don't think that's an unreasonable presumption to make. I also want people to realize that I also recognize that we're not going to have perfect adherence to all the safety policies. You just can't do that in a school setting. There'll be times when kids cross each other that are less than 6 feet, or the younger kids are acting together. But in a multi-layered public health intervention, you're starting with a rate of 1 in 200 kids who may be positive in day one. To break through with an outbreak that actually originates from school, you'd have to have that one kid also take their mask off, spend a considerable time in close proximity to another kid, right? Not have gone through the symptom screening in the school. And so there's a lot of ifs that have to happen. That can happen. I mean, no plan is ever perfect, but a multi-layered public health intervention accepts that there may not be full adherence to any one part of the plan, but in concert, you have multiple layers there that confer some protection to your community. And I think we've seen that now, particularly in areas that have opened in rates similar to our own.
Great, thank you so much.
Mr. Mooring?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rubin, for spending the time with us this evening. Just had one question. I think it's kind of building off of your last response, and that is, one area that there is some concern is around lunch. We've been able to avoid it at some levels, but not at all. And just what are your thoughts around how do we make that as safe as possible for children that will be in some proximity without masks in order to eat?
Yeah, so I will say that my team, our whole team is not with us today. We have a whole infection control team that has worked on this. We've talked a lot about lunchtime. The highest risks in the school setting are your lunchtime, you're moving through the hallways, and then your sport and your activities or your sports after school, and how well you manage those. In terms of lunchtime, I think we have to get used to a different type of lunch this year. I mean, we're recommending that lunches be in the classroom. You deliver lunches, that the lunches be quiet. Now, how do you keep kids quiet during lunch? You put on a good movie or documentary, or or an audible book. That is the moment where you're most going to do your masking break. Now, kids don't need 25 minutes to eat, so you try to limit the amount of time. You can alternate the class as you go through the audible lunch or through the lunchtime instruction, where half eat while the other half watches the documentary, and then they switch off. So you can do some other things that we've seen districts do. But this idea of silent lunches and kids distance, some places are using plexiglass. Not everyone has the resources to do that, to keep kids in smaller pods. But I think that's going to be sort of this routine we kind of get into this year to try to minimize the likelihood of transmission during lunchtime, which is not just an issue for students. One of the biggest risks is actually your staff in the schools when they kind of sit down to coffee with their friend and they pull off their mask, moment of transmission. And we've seen that even in some of our healthcare facilities.
Ms. Kalish?
Yes, thank you. So I had something that's been kind of going through my mind, and I was hoping, Dr. Rubin, that you could tell me if I'm off base with it. Something I'm thinking about with regards to opening our sports again is whether it should be something that we're concerned about, that a level of contact among a sports team could create a larger outbreak within our school population. Or is that something I'm worrying about overmuch with regards to opening sports again?
No, it's absolutely one of the moments of transmission, like school. I think it's manageable. And I think every school district has to make their own decision on how they manage that. I think obviously the lowest contact sports, we haven't seen outbreaks on the tennis court. We haven't read about a lot of tennis outbreaks this summer, right? I haven't read, I haven't even read about a lot of, honestly, softball, and there's been a lot of travel leagues already going on with softball and baseball, and there's plenty of opportunities to distance, have kids wear masks. It all comes down to how well you can do your safety protocols in those sports. It's these highest contact sports that are the ones that you have to ask yourself in terms of the trade-off. Am I doing individual training right now, or am I going back to some level of scrimmaging and team competition? And there are ways to do that at lower community incidents. You can probably safely do that with compacts within the team. Testing can help in the highest contact sports if they're really important to a district. Look, I don't want to render opinion as to the nature of high school football in a region. It's an important experience for a lot of families, not every family. But if it's that important to you, then you're going to put the testing in place like they're doing in colleges and in the pros. And even then, that's not a foolproof kind of thing. And then if you can't do that, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? And I think in the context of keeping your schools open, that's a decision that I think every district and every league is going through right now.
Thank you. Mr. Driscoll?
Thank you, Dr. Rubin, for your time tonight. I appreciate that as well. I don't know if you'd be able to comment, but we've heard questions coming in about the ability to get test results quickly and therefore do effective contact tracing. I think months ago I took a test. It took 2 weeks to find out what my result was. I don't know if you're seeing any changes in that you can comment about tonight.
Well, I think that is changing. I think the rapid antigen tests are becoming more available. I know that, at least the urgent care centers throughout the Lower Merion region have access to much more rapid turnaround tests now than they did. Certainly at CHOP, we're turning around tests within 24 hours. I even heard some word about Montgomery's public health opening up some testing sites as well, too. I can't comment on that. I think the issue of testing and turnaround is something that the school district has to work closely with the Montgomery Public Health Department. There's an important partnership there. I don't, in general, think schools should be doing their own contact tracing. I mean, obviously within the school, if you have a COVID positive kid in the classroom, you'll know, which kids were sitting nearby that kid. But if you're doing 6-foot distancing and masking, that should confer less risk as to the kids who are in that classroom. The only time I think you're going to get in trouble this year is if there's link transmission within the school. We can always expect there's going to be a few kids coming in and out because of COVID, and you're going to work with your public health department to decide the quarantine practices for the other kids around that kid. But unless there's link transmission in the school, I don't, which means that, a kid has COVID in the classroom or a whole team, like we talked about in the previous question, is suddenly positive, that may lead to some level of reverting to distance learning if there's a significant outbreak within the school. But I do think the testing turnaround will be there increasingly as we move through the fall.
Thank you. I think I'll take a moment and ask, and again, I want to thank you as well for sharing your time and expertise with us. I did want to ask about masks in general and specifically around gaiters. There's a lot of discussion in the community about whether gaiters or face shields are appropriate or acceptable, and I just wanted to get your take on that.
I'm not a fan of gaiters. I'm not a fan of bandanas. I think there's some pretty good studies. I mean, I even tried a gaiter early on in this process. And if anyone's get one of those gaiters on, they're not holding back anything. So, we're recommending the surgical masks. Honestly, you don't need N95s. The ones that have the wire bridge, you can get them on Amazon really cheaply. You can try a couple different types if there's a comfort issue, but they also help your glasses from fogging up for those of us who wear glasses. Those are the ones that tend to work the best, and I think I think cloth masks are okay as well too, in the context for those people who don't have surgical masks. But the gaiters and the bandanas have already been shown to be less efficacious than even the cloth or certainly the surgical masks. Now, in terms of face shields, there are a few. Yeah, I'm not. The face shields, I think wraparound goggles work pretty well. That's what I wear in my own practice for those people. I think they're more of an indication for the staff. Staff who might be working in elementary school and need to approach the kids might add a face mask on top of their mask. As a single mechanism, we don't recommend face shields. There's a fair amount of respiratory droplets, and I do want to make a comment about respiratory droplets because there's been a bunch of news today that I'm sure confused a lot of people. But respiratory droplets can get out from underneath those face masks alone. I think it's nice as a double up effort. I think there are some interesting face masks that have come out for the teachers. I saw one from Alaska that actually ends up with a covering over the neck because there is some concerns about whether kids need to see visual cues when they're in the classroom. There are also some interesting face masks now that actually have a clear, almost visor over the mouth to allow for some of that. So there's been a lot of ingenuity out there. But I tend to think of the face mask as, if a kid really can't, there's very few kids who can't wear a mask. There may be some kids who can't wear a mask that you're better off using a face shield than nothing, but that should be the exception, not the rule. Now, just quickly on the mechanism of transmission for this virus. I will say this because I have the confidence of our infection control team at CHOP and also the studies on this virus. The major mode of transmission in this virus is large respiratory droplet transmission. Does that mean that there aren't sometimes some airborne particles, or nothing's ever binary in life? That there might be these tiny aerosolized particles, and you can demonstrate a choir that may have had aerosolized transmission, sure. But the proof is in the pudding. And, in terms of household transmission, and these are households with active COVID patients, the rate of transmission to a secondary family member is only about 15%. That is consistent with other viruses that spread primarily by respiratory droplets. When you think of aerosolized transmission, you think of measles and you think of chickenpox. If measles and chickenpox enters a home, it almost universally exposes everyone in the home because it aerosolizes. So the proof is in the pudding. While there may be some aerosolized droplets, the vast majority of what's going on here is large respiratory droplets that disperse within 6 feet. And we should feel confident with our protocols and the additions of masking and distancing that we're handling the primary mode of transmission. We're handling some secondary transmission, which is much more minor with regards to hygiene and disinfection. But despite what the CDC said today, the evidence would bear out that this is largely a large respiratory droplet transmission virus.
Thank you very much. I want to pass it over to Ms. Buckman, who had collected some parent and community questions earlier today.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. The first question, the one that came up most often from members of our community, was about the gaiters versus face shields. So thank you very much, Dr. Rubin, for addressing that. There were several questions about the metrics, and you did touch on this a little bit, but several people observed that there had been some upticks recently in the numbers. So could you talk a little bit about how Lower Merion's current reopening plan, starting with bringing kindergartners back next week and then adding grades over the next several weeks, how that aligns with your guidelines and metrics?
Well, number one, it's always tricky to look at county rates because school districts exist within counties and like things can be different. You know, you look at the Montgomery County rate and Lower Merion can be different, and Norristown can be different. You know, you can have places that are higher or places that are lower. So Montgomery County's rate or Lower Merion's rates are also being affected by some level of the transmission at St. Joe's, which may or may not confer risk to our community if it's being contained. And they largely haven't had the significant type of outbreak. So you have to sometimes differentiate where the numbers are coming from. But that said, I think the most important thing is whether it goes from 35 to 40, back to 38 or 37, the large, I'm sort of a forest from the trees and I see stable. You know, there's an uncertainty here in terms of the wavering rates. If I had seen this thing go from 40 to 120, like we're seeing in areas that are growing from 40, 50 up to 200 per 100,000. That's a clear signal. I would hold that our rates have been fairly stable here for several weeks. We had a little uptick in late August that kind of came back a bit. Testing positivity has been relatively stable, save for some additional cases that have been coming from a couple of the colleges in Lower Merion during the routine testing that they're doing, and their contact tracing. So I kind of feel like the rates are stable. And I started with that example that said, okay, if you're at 35, then you might expect 3 or 4 kids in a school of 1,000. Well, if you're at 50, you're going to expect 5. Is the difference between 3 or 4 and 5 and 6 in the context of judging your plan really that different? And the answer in most cases is no, unless you have a bad plan. I mean, the two have to exist together. And so I think all told, I see relatively stable rates, and I see a runway in the presence of a good, strong school mitigation plan could get schools open.
Thank you, Dr. Rubin. You also talked a little bit about the possibilities of testing and the protocols for athletes. Do you see value in testing all students and staff prior to their entering the building?
No, not routinely. I know some private schools have the advantage of doing that. You know, the sensitivity of this test in asymptomatic individuals may only be it's probably less than 50%. It's most sensitive the day or two before illness, and certainly in the first day or two of symptomatic illness. And so routine testing, to me, if you were at higher rates of incidence and you were trying to keep your schools open, like colleges are doing, they're doing much more frequent testing of their students. They're much higher risk, but at our rates, I think we can use symptom surveillance in our protocols alone to get kids back and staff back into the building.
The current Lower Merion plan adds additional groups of students coming back in 1-week intervals. Do you think that's a sufficient rate of ramping up the school population?
I don't want to comment on the individual school plan because that's not what we commented on infection control mostly, but I will say that I think the window, my concern now is how long this window will be. And I think the sooner you get them in and have a chance to really work on your protocols while rates are low is going to be better. So whether you bring it, to me, I'm not sure how long that window is going to be. Hopefully we'll be in a relatively warm sort of, post-summer period, and it won't really get cold until late October, right? And then people will not flood the bars and people will not have the gatherings, and we won't see that big transmission. But honestly, this thing has changed so quickly that I don't know how long that window is going to be open. What I want to do is take advantage of this window, get as many kids back. And so if that means you do it every week, or you bring like the elementary school back first and then do the middle and the high school, or do it in 2 or 3 steps, to me, I think more about sort of how long that window is going to be than how many steps you take.
Do you think we're going to get to a point this year where schools will be able to open with their full populations full time? And what would the metrics have to look like for that to happen, knowing that we can't keep all of our students in our buildings and maintain that physical distancing?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, some school districts do have the ability to have very large campuses, and obviously our private schools are getting their entire enrollment. Some of our private schools here in Lower Merion. I think the 6-foot distancing is that important at the rates that we're seeing. And going into winter, I don't foresee us seeing those rates anytime soon that we're going to get, unless you can achieve the 6-foot distancing and spreading kids out in other community buildings. There are other school districts that are figuring out ways to use other buildings to continue to spread kids out. Other places have said, look, we'll keep the high school kids online and we'll get all the elementary schools in full time. I've seen other versions where it said, okay, we're going to do hybrid, but we're not going to do virtual instruction. So we're going to bring kids in 2 days a week. We're going to do math. We're going to do reading. We're going to do science, and then give them some documentaries and worksheets and flip the curriculum for the other half of the students the other 2 days a week. Perfect may be the enemy of good here in terms of how you trade off your strategies, and recognize that we're not also trying to put kids on screens for 10 hours a day, and seeing the value of allowing kids who are also facing traumas of their own. They may see teachers get sick, or have had teachers get sick, or they may see family members get sick, that we need to think about the unstructured time and the space for people to breathe a little bit as we go through this year, and adjust our curriculums to meet the challenge.
And I want to be respectful of your time, but I think this is also an important question that was raised a few times. And that is, why even suggest a return to school? Isn't it safer for children to remain home?
I don't know, there are trade-offs there. I mean, I think socio-emotionally, I think kids have been isolated. It's had impacts. I have kids too. I mean, I've seen it in my own kids. I think this virus is going to be with us for a while. We have to learn to accommodate to it. I mean, certainly there are thresholds in there of disease activity. We have to prepare to dial up and dial down. But I do think that kids benefit from being in school together. I think there are a lot of parents who benefit, who have to participate at work, and there's this fine balance that's created with workforce participation, kids being in school, not falling behind. I think, we're often making decisions between bad or worse. And I think that in some ways we're trying to balance all these different risks and come up with a solution that makes the best sense. I think for those parents who may have health conditions, who may still feel unsure, they still have an option. I think what we focused on in infection control was providing as safe an environment as we can in the schools, protect those children, their caregivers who do choose the in-school instruction, but certainly protect our teachers and our staff, because these are communities that are really trying to support each other.
Thank you. I know we've already held you over many more minutes than you committed to.
Thank you, Dr. Rubin. Appreciate it.
All right. Good luck,
We're
everyone.
spending a lot of time together in the last few weeks, I know.
Yeah. Good luck, everyone. Have a healthy and safe school year as you get started. All right.
And I won't be telling
you.
anybody at
Thank
the
you.
Ardmore Market what you said, so I'll
All right.
keep it myself.
Yeah. All right. Bye now.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we can move on to the next part of our very extensive agenda for the evening. And I'll pass it back to Mr. Copeland for the reopening update.
Thank you, Mrs. Klein. So following that, as I mentioned in a letter not too long ago, we've relooked at some of the things that we're doing. We wanted to make sure that if we were going to go back in school, it was going to be a strong program. And it has evolved since the summer. We've learned new things. We've tried new things, and we found different solutions for similar kinds of problems. So let me begin by introducing our new assistant superintendent, Dr. Alexis McLoyne, and she and Dr. Gaudioso will take us through the intricacies of the district plan.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland.
I've lost track of who's driving the.
I think it's coming
It
up
must
now.
be Megan Schaefer. Okay.
Yeah, here we go. So tonight we're going to review the district recommendations for a model return to make our students in-person instruction in the upcoming weeks. Next slide. On September 14th, we sent out a correspondence with a plan for a phased reopening, which included the intention of bringing kindergarten students to school on September 29th. There is no school on the 28th, so students would start on that Tuesday. And we would also include the next group of special education students at that time. Grades 1 through 3, we're looking to return on October 5th. Grades 4 through 5 on October 12th, and grades 6 through 12 on October 19th. Next slide. The district is proposing a hybrid model of instruction for grades 1 through 5 at the elementary level and the middle school and the high school. Grades 1 through 5 would follow a half-day schedule, Monday through Thursday, with a blended remote Friday. Students would be assigned to an AM or a PM cohort. At the middle and the high school, students would have an alternate day schedule, Monday through Thursday, with a blended remote Friday. So students would be assigned to a Monday, Wednesday cohort or a Tuesday, Thursday cohort. Kindergarten would attend 5 days a week for a half-day session, AM or PM. Next slide. As you'll look at this schedule, you'll see that kindergarten through 5th grade actually has an extended schedule by 15 minutes past the traditional schedule in the district. This allows us to maximize class time and to pick up students from the AM cohort to bring them home, and then pick up the PM cohort and bring them to school. So the AM cohort would start at 9 a.m. and they would end at 11:50, and the PM cohort would start at 1 p.m. and end at 3:50. Middle school and high school would have no change to their bell schedule, and so middle school would start at 8:15 and end at 3:05, and high school would start at 7:30 and end at 2:40.
Let me just interject, Alexia, if you go back to that, so for the 1 o'clock to 3:50 as opposed to 3:35, that's an extra 15 minutes at that afternoon, because we are going to have a difficult time getting all of I think there was about 28 or 30 buses, Mr. Lill, that we knew were going to be 10 or 15 minutes late if we didn't make that move. Am I correct?
That is correct. We're anticipating about 78 routes that will be needed midday, and our initial assessment was correct. That's about 28 routes that we were concerned would not arrive in time without that additional 15 minutes of transit time.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Sorry, Alexis.
No, that's okay. Thank you. Dr. Gaudioso is going to take over for the benefits of the revised hybrid schedule.
So this summer, parents may recall we shared proposals for hybrid schedules for the district. We've made some revisions to these schedules to offer greater continuity of instruction for students from K to 12. If you'll recall, our original hybrid proposal cohorted students into a Monday, Tuesday cohort or a Thursday, Friday cohort with a deep cleaning day in between those cohorts, while teachers provided blended learning through a remote day. Health and safety guidance has since changed, and now knowing our nightly cleaning protocols meet the safety requirements, we've adjusted the hybrid for improved continuity of instruction to avoid that gap created by 2 asynchronous days back to back. Additionally, the half-day hybrid being offered for elementary achieves daily in-person learning for our youngest learners. It eliminates that K-5 lunch safety challenge that you heard Dr. Rubin talking about, reduces screen time for our youngest learners, which has been a concern. Our team spent a great deal of time working through the obstacles to improve these offerings, so we're pleased at the changes in the hybrid schedule that better support students. Next slide, please. Now, kindergarten students will follow the half-day kindergarten schedule Monday through Friday. So while they'll be on that adjusted schedule that Dr. McGloin mentioned in terms of their 11:50 end, they will be continuing on Friday while 1 through 5 students are remote. Blended learning opportunities on virtual days for middle school students, an improvement in the adjusted hybrid schedules. Additionally, so is synchronous learning on virtual days for our high school students.
Next slide, please. The design on Fridays provides a blend of approaches from grades 1 to 12. Students will have the opportunity for both remote synchronous learning and asynchronous learning. And this maintains continuity of instruction across all grade levels, but also allows buildings to hold many of the collaborations, the meetings, the learning, the professional learning that is needed to maintain systems and practices, and also support continuous improvement throughout the year. These include faculty meetings, IEP meetings, GIPs, 504 meetings, parent meetings, as well as professional learning community meetings, and this collaborative and professional planning. One of the challenges buildings will face on return to in-person learning is the increased need for supervision and managing the different mustering areas and safe transitions for students to maintain the distancing protocols. So the typical meeting times may no longer work with the staffing needed to implement building safety plans, and Friday, some of the supplemental time will be used there. Next slide, please. Here's a sample. This chart shows what the AM student cohort schedule would look like. Students would attend in person in the morning from 9 a.m. to 3:50 p.m. I'm sorry, 9 a.m. to 11:50 p.m. We've adjusted the PM session to ensure the arrivals, as you heard. Students would attend remote asynchronous sessions in the afternoon. Friday would be their remote blended day, where they have some that are live, some sessions that are live and remote, and some that are asynchronous. Next slide. And this is the same slide from the PM cohort. The PM cohort would experience some remote asynchronous learning in the morning, and they would have their afternoon would be their live and in-person sessions. One of the things the principals are exploring is how to build in some synchronous opportunities in that remote part of the day. And that's something that they'll continue to work to refine over the next week or so. Next slide, please. So here's a sample detail schedule. And here you can see a sample of a student day. This could be a first grader who is in an AM cohort. Each day, students will have a full day of school, experiencing all subjects, some in person and some from home. This possible 2-day cycle gives students the opportunity to experience each subject area in person every other day, while the remainder of each school day would be spent asynchronously or at home. And these actual schedules will vary by building. This is just a glimpse of what it could look like. Next slide, please. And here you see the view of the asynchronous remote time for the AM group. So this is how their afternoon could look. When home in the afternoon, students would still work through assignments and instructional resources to complete their school day subjects. Principals are working on some really creative ideas for ways to incorporate that synchronous time in the afternoon, possibly some special areas, small groups. There's a lot of creative thinking happening to finalize the best allocation of instructional minutes within these AM and PM blocks. One of the priorities of the principals is to reallocate minutes in a way that provides students some daily in-person language arts and math each day. We recognize while we prefer to be in person until we can safely do that together, as a whole group, this is a hybrid model with some limitations, but principals are working hard to fine-tune even further to maximize the in-person opportunities with students. And those final schedules will be shared as we get closer to start dates and have parent information nights. Next slide, please. So this is a sample grade 1 to 5 Friday schedule. You can see it is a remote schedule. If you are in looking at a gray line there, you're looking at something that may be asynchronous. If you're looking at a green line, it could still be a synchronous session that is held on Friday. And the morning meeting could still occur. Language arts could still occur. It's a larger block of time that could accommodate some of our whole group to small group rotations. You'll see that there are some science specials in the afternoon. Again, math is synchronous. This sample reflects a student day with those subjects scheduled where they would be in the typical week. However, there could be some revision there if certain things are offered more in the morning to accommodate meeting times in the afternoon. There also may be some opportunity for small groups by invitation, and it also gives us as a district the opportunity to support all of those meetings I mentioned previously, but also do some substantive PD work with teachers so that we can continue to improve our delivery of instruction in these models. Next slide.
So the middle school sample schedule is shown on the screen right now. And so it's cohorts of alternating in-person instruction, either again, like I said, Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, with Friday as a remote blended day, where students may remain home and receive both synchronous and asynchronous instruction. While at home, students will meet every period, every day with teachers for meaningful, engaging activities and for attendance check-ins. And so when a student is not in person but at home, they will still have check-ins with every teacher every day. The schedule rotates weekly to enable students to receive in-person instruction for all of their classes. And so when you look at the schedule, you'll see it is every other day, and we have A, B, C, D that first week, and then it actually alternates to D, C, B, A. And again, it rotates back to A, B, C, D, and back to D, C, B, A. And that is so students can see every one of their teachers, including specialists. November 3rd is on there, but that is actually, this is just a sample, and that is actually an in-service day. It's just a mock so that you can understand how the schedule might look. Next slide. This is a sample of the middle school bell schedule. Currently, we're running on 4 blocks. When we return to hybrid, we will have a normal bell schedule with 8 periods and a learn period built in. This is a sample of the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade schedule. Next slide. Again, this is a sample of a middle school Friday schedule. On Fridays, as we had mentioned, the students will remain at home and participate in blending learning for both synchronous and asynchronous opportunities. This is a sample schedule where you see blocks of art, math, science, French in this case, special social studies, and English. And during these instructional blocks, students may have their teachers do a check-in with them. We might have small group instruction going on, both synchronous and asynchronous. But the students will be assigned work during the day. And so if they don't have a touch point with their teacher at that time, they may just work from home as well. Next slide, please. This is the sample high school schedule. And again, we have cohorts of alternating in-person instruction. And so it is Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, like the middle school. You'll see that Friday on this schedule again is that remote blended learning. The typical 4-day rotation now becomes an 8-day rotation with both sets of cohorts attending an A day, then a B day, then a C day, and then a D day. Learning moves forward on all of those days, but allows for students to see their teachers in person on every rotation. This slide is the proposed high school bell schedule, and you'll note that lunch and learn does not exist in this schedule. This is actually an older high school bell schedule that we reverted to so that we have 3 30-minute lunch periods built in versus the lunch and learn period. And that is occurring so that we can make sure that we adhere strictly to the health and safety plan and have the structure that is necessary during this time. Once we return to a full instruction in the high school, we'll return to the lunch and learn period. The intervention time for lunch and learn is dispersed into the classes to allow for more cleanup and prep time between classes. It also allows for intervention and checks for understanding at the end of each period. Next slide. This slide is a sample high school Friday schedule, and you'll note again that every period is on this schedule. It allows for flexibility in this schedule to meet a variety of needs for our students, such as lost intervention time from lunch and learn, additional small group instruction. We also will be able to have speakers and clubs and organizations and student groups meet on Friday that we would traditionally have during that lunch and learn time. And that will be available now on that Friday blended day instead.
And we have to do something to get a lunch in there.
We do. Yes, we missed the lunch. Thank you for pointing that out. We do need to get a lunch in there. So this is a sample schedule that will need a little bit of adjustment. Next slide. So our next steps are to release the cohort schedules on Wednesday to all families so that they can plan. And then we'll be releasing bus schedules for kindergarten by the end of the week. At elementary grades 1 through 5 would be at the end of next week by October 2nd. Secondary would be early October by October 19th. When the bus schedules are released, they will be released into PowerSchool for families. We're anticipating sending out a parent survey on transportation in early October. We need to see who's going to need transportation, or if we need different stops as well with transportation. And we plan on holding family information sessions. That information will be disseminated by the building principals, the dates for that, but we're anticipating that within the next few weeks. Next slide.
So at this point in time,
yeah, go ahead. All right.
You want me to go ahead and cover that?
Yeah, go ahead. No,
okay, so in light of tonight's agenda item, the board is being asked to approve the updated health and safety plan, which reflects in a very brief way the presentation that you just heard regarding the phased-in approach to in-person learning over the course of the next few weeks. And it also, in the updated or revised resolution, includes some further recommended revisions to the plan relating to masking and social distancing, which we are recommending to incorporate into the updated plan. Perhaps Ms. Quinlan can give some additional details on that piece of it regarding the updates to the masking protocols.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Schaefer. We wanted to reflect the newer knowledge that masks do offer more protection than the face shields and the gaiters. So with few exceptions, we'd be implementing a mask policy for all students and staff. And previously, you may recall in the health and safety plan, earlier on, it was a recommendation that students could remove masks if they were seated 6 feet apart in class, for example. And we now know that that's no longer the safest option. So we are implementing a plan in which students would only remove masks at mealtime, and even then for shorter periods, or during structured mass breaks in which they're seated 6 feet apart, and remove it for short periods of time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And that concludes the presentation on the revisions to the district health and safety plan and the presentation regarding the phased return to school. The next part would be relating to the athletics plan. Mr. Cooper, would you like us to proceed?
Yeah, Mrs. Klein, do you want us to break for board questions here, or do you want us to just complete it and then?
I think we should complete it and break afterwards.
Okay.
All right. Moving on, the other agenda item relating to an update to the health and safety plans that we have in place is an update to the plan for athletics. Importantly, the plan contains the health and safety protocols that were previously approved by the board both in June and August for a return to play. Recently, the Central Athletic League issued a return to play plan, and the administration has carefully reviewed that plan and is recommending a phased return to practices for fall sports, except for water polo, beginning September 29th, and thereafter competition would be limited if the metrics still remain favorable on October 2nd, and that competition would be limited to league play only, including an abbreviated schedule of league-only competitions, as well as a league tournament or championship. It is also being recommended to move forward with increasing the level of contact in football practices, and we will again continue to monitor the metrics as to whether we proceed with any competitions in football. Relating to those competitions, the guidance, the updated plan requires close monitoring of the metrics in our competing or our competitors' areas to determine whether it's safe to continue with those related competitions. So that is the plan for high school athletics. On the middle school side, the Central Athletic League determined that middle school sports would be only offered as intramural experiences. Fortunately, in Lower Merion, we do have 2 middle schools in which to try to create an intramural experience. Both our Valley Kenwood Middle School and Walsh Valley Middle School are looking to initiate a modified intramural program wherein or in which sports would begin virtual workouts towards the end of this month, and then continue virtually until in-person learning resumes in later October, potentially culminating with a competition between the schools. So it would be one competition, but it would be an opportunity to bring students together and do some level of practice and opportunity to engage in that activity, although it be abbreviated. So both schools are looking to put that together for the sports that are typically played during the fall. And finally, the activities at both high school and middle school level are all schools are intending to resume clubs to the extent possible virtually, and encourage students to participate in those clubs as they have a robust offering of clubs and activities for students. While they will be primarily virtual offerings, there will be opportunities when appropriate and when the health and safety guidelines can be followed to offer some limited in-person experiences for some clubs and activities, and there will be a protocol to follow to allow for those opportunities. And that's the end of that segment of the presentation.
Great.
Questions or comments?
If any board members have questions or comments, if you could please raise your hand. And just so people in the audience know that after the board comments, we will do our committee reports, and then there'll be an opportunity for public comment via the chat, as we've done in the past meetings recently. So let's start with Ms. Ackman.
Hi, thank you for the presentation and all the thought and effort that went into this. There was a lot of parent feedback, and I just appreciate all the planning, even though everyone has to contend with some change. My question is, in terms of transportation, is there still the ability for high school students to drive and park at high school? And also, will siblings, where possible, be cohorted together?
I think yes to the siblings. There's an ongoing attempt to try and keep families together. We're not expanding the amount of driving by students to the high schools. We are, high school principals are somewhere in this mix of pictures here, looking to, if you've got first period free, forgive that from being late for everybody, not just seniors. Is that correct, Mr. Hughes?
Yes, we're looking at what they call campus privilege for 9 through 12 if you have a first set free or a last set to leave early. In terms of parking, we're not increasing the number, but we will be able to, if we're in the hybrid model, You know, depending on what cohort you have, we should be able to work out some type of program that allows for the two cohorts to each have their own spaces on those different days.
Other questions?
Thank you. Ms. Kalish?
Thank you. So my question, I have a few, but I imagine we all do. My question is particularly with regards to homework and how that will work when our kids are having largely asynchronous time. I could understand now as we're going back into the building, a teacher assigning homework, especially at the middle and secondary grades. But I'm wondering both at what the administration's approach to the value of homework when everything is homework that's asynchronous, and how that's going to balanced and approached.
Yeah, let me, before I turn it over to Alexis and Jen to talk about that specifically, let me say that this entire process has been one that we've looked at in terms of impact for students. And the fact that spending so much time on a Zoom and trying to, we've got a very strong program and a very challenging high school program, but trying to provide that for students and not sort of beat them down, but at the same time, keep a high level of delivery has been a challenge and will continue to be. But I know the principals have been discussing that. Why don't we go to the high school first? Alexis, you want to talk?
Sure. So we will be doing primarily synchronous and in-person instruction at the high school level, with the exception of Friday, which will be that asynchronous/synchronous day. And so, you know, during that time, high school will be, I believe, assigning homework. Middle school right now, my understanding is we're not assigning homework. We have to have some more discussions about the value of that once we return to the hybrid model and how we want to approach that moving forward, because students will be in person some of the time and have connections the days that they're not in person. So we'll be revisiting that and making a determination on how to move forward in the near future.
Jen, I don't know if this has come up much at the elementary, has it?
A little bit. I think with, well, one, with the AM/PM hybrid, students are going to be working somewhat independently, part of every day. I think, you know, the opportunities to be independent and have skills practice is a piece of our previous discussions. We had a lot of discussion about, and I'm thinking, you know, back earlier in the year on the idea of engagement. And trying to, if we're assigning anything extra, it's along the Genius Hour type of real engaging activity for students. And some of that conversation involved even summer prototyping. I would say for the fall, we're really just looking to have students have the opportunity to develop habits, routines, skills practice, and work with parents to gauge the right amount of each. So this would be one of those areas for continuous improvement through the year, where we'll just keep a close eye on what's appropriate for students and what's going to support them, you know, that student-centered lens.
And let me just say that, thank you, Jen. Let me just say that one of the things that happened obviously during the spring is we turned around on a dime, went to this remote program, and we tried to learn as we were doing it. This is going to be, I mean, we think we've got a much better foothold into our planning and what we're going to do, but we still have some unknowns that we're going to have to see, and we're going to have to learn. I mean, I was in one of the high schools today, and the teachers they found a way to use a whiteboard so that they could see all their students at once without looking at the Zoom projector. That's something that somebody stumbled onto, and I saw it, you know, put to great use. So we're going to have to depend on some ingenuity of some of our teachers as they're actually employing these things to say, hey, I think there's a better way of doing this, and then we can listen to them, and if we can do it, we do it.
Thanks. I really appreciate the approach the administration is taking to sort of learn and evolve and go with what's working and let go of things without having like immense amounts of pride because one worked on it, and just really modeling for our kids doing the best that we can and not overwhelming them or ourselves.
Thank you. Mr. Driscoll?
Thank you. I guess my question is, obviously this plan is one we're going to live with, you know, foreseeable future. But it is true that if, heaven forbid, things go south, we'll have to revert back to remote. But also there is the possibility, that maybe in January, February, if things get actually better, we could revise this plan a little bit to get more in, assuming the medical science backs us up with a potential future change. This is not the plan locked in step for the rest of the year based on what information we could learn. Am I drawing a...
I'd be surprised if we end the year the way we're starting the year. I'd be disappointed if we end the year the way we're starting the year, because I think that we're going to grow. Look, one of the things that, before I had Alexis join us, and it would have been nice if she'd come about a month earlier, just as an aside, Jennifer Gaudioso and I were talking about revisiting the AM/PM. When was that, Jen? Over a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago. But we really didn't have the ability to do it very much then because we were so busy gearing up for the remote. And then when we started to look at it, it was like, look, we realized that people are going to be sort of set in their ways on one hybrid, and do we really want to switch the hybrid? And the issue was, well, if it's really a much better design, and we know that that's going to be a different direction than some people expected, and it's going to create problems. So it was a balance of what do we do? And we think that this is a better model. It gives better consistency, but we also know that there are some folks that it's not going to work for or work well for.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you. So as the parent of an elementary student, I do personally like the idea of daily in-person school better than 3 days of asynchronous. That being said, I think I'm having a bit of a reaction to the process of how we got here. And it just, we've been communicating to parents for months to plan for a 2-3 hybrid schedule. And not to say that we need to be locked into that, but parents were expressly told that AM/PM splits were not possible. And I hear what you're saying, that it will not work for some, but it's a better model. But many families, have made accommodations and planned based on that prior communication, especially being told that the AM/PM splits were not possible. And then I think that further complicating it, at least, for many families, especially like probably the most vulnerable families that rely on older children to care for younger children. Now our schedules will make the older kids' schedules incompatible with the younger kids. So I wonder if it's, even though it's better, it does seem like it creates a lot of challenges for a lot of families.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just said that we wished that weren't the case. This is what we're recommending. If the cure is worse for the community than, or if the operation is worse than the cure, or whatever, however you phrase it, we can go back.
Ms. Finger?
Thank you. I am just curious about the check-ins that the kids will have when they are not in school. So are those things that are going to be built in? Will they be checking in and potentially participating remotely with the students who are in the building? And is this going to be something that might be different at different levels? So, for example, in high school, would potentially those check-ins happen via, will they be streaming? Will students be participating using?
Just the high school.
Just the high school. But what about in the elementary school? Because you did mention Dr. Gaudioso or Dr. Ms. McGloin, that even when kids are at home, they'll still have a daily check-in with their teacher. So how will that be built in to the teacher's schedule and the student's schedule? And would they
I think they were
potentially-
talking about, I thought they were talking about a Friday, but go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I think we were talking about in elementary, taking daily attendance and morning meeting, but certainly monitoring through the day so we can keep an eye on student participation through the day. Kind of looking at it as two separate discrete things, you know, your attendance versus participation versus work completion, which I think last year we had a little bit more of an all-in-one look at our students engaging. And this year we're really looking at them as finite data points that really give us a whole picture of the student. But that recording is going to be something that's required in elementary.
Thank you.
I could speak to the middle school as well if you would like for a second. So yeah, we are talking about having a daily connection with the teachers at the middle level, be it maybe the beginning of the classroom, it could even be during classroom and breakout groups. And then also it could happen at the end of the classroom, but there is that daily check-in piece using the digital tools that are available to our staff so that there is a connection at the middle school with students when they are not in class in person on a daily basis.
Thank you. Mr. Mooring?
Thanks. And this may have been addressed in in answering Deborah's question, but it was around how we're factoring in students who are going to need extra support in this process, and particularly around our elementary students who have the AM/PM schedule, which feels a little tight in terms of then being able to get any additional attention if needed, and then also with our high school students who have taken advantage of and been used to having that extra time through lunch and learn with having that removed. How are we looking at navigating students who need some one-on-one time with their teachers?
And I could start for elementary. One of the ways that the principals and teachers relied on small group instruction last year was to tailor and individualize supports for students so that they can monitor students who do need a little extra help and provide that. Principals are looking really creatively at the schedules to determine, even in that non-in-person time, is there any possible other way to have synchronous connections with students? So they're really trying to be innovative with that thinking. But for sure, the small group rotations that have been part of our practice would likely continue to be so, with an eye on that success and experience of students.
At the high school level, the additional time from the Lunch and Learn was added on to classroom periods. And so the idea with that is that there's some time at the end of the period for some intervention work that's necessary. And then also that would occur on Fridays. When we have the asynchronous remote day, there'll be that synchronous time for small group instruction and intervention as it's necessary. So that's where it's built in.
Great. Thank you. Before we start cycling through some additional questions from the board members, I thought I would jump in with one or two as well. I wanted to ask about in the situation where there is a positive case in a classroom. I know that the contact tracing and sort of the information goes through the Montgomery Office of Public Health and sort of is housed there, and it becomes their responsibility. But I'm wondering if someone can speak to whether classmates or grades or schools would be informed of cases in the classroom and how that works. I understand that there's sort of balance there with HIPAA as well.
Quinlan?
Sure. We work very closely with the health department, our health services teams, so that if there's a positive case identified, whether it's reported to us first by a parent or a teacher, or whether it's reported to us by the health department, we're in daily contact. And so they are responsible for the contact tracing, but we support them very much in their efforts. So they would be looking at all of those people that had contact, close contact with the infected person. And by that, they mean within 6 feet with or without a mask for 15 minutes or more. So we would work to identify those people. That is something that's a little bit simpler in an elementary setting, and not so simple in a high school setting. So the specific determinations of who would need to be quarantined would need to be done in collaboration with the Office of Public Health and with the superintendent and health services. It's usually a collaborative effort where we work together on the communications. Now, so you can be assured that anybody that is a close contact would be notified by the health department or by a member of the health services team at their direction. Additionally, Ms. Buckman has worked on a COVID dashboard for our website in which any positive cases will be indicated by school, and they are not, and further separated by student or staff member. Of course, the persons are not identified because we can't do that. And I wanted to point out that because there is a positive on there does not mean that the case was transmitted in the school setting. It can certainly mean just that a person became positive because of an exposure elsewhere. So we would not want people to assume that it was a school-acquired exposure. So you could look for those two things, either a personal notification or you could check that website, the COVID dashboard daily.
Great, thank you. And then a quick question about, I know there are a lot of questions in the community about how things will work in terms of kids moving between classes. And I know that that's very building specific. And I wanted to ask, so, or just confirm that there are going to be building specific meetings at some point that go sort of through all those details that are really very building specific.
Yes, the building principals are going to hold sessions for their buildings.
Great, thank you. Ms. Ackman?
Yes, thank you. Given Dr. Rubin's comments about this is a really good window to get some in-person learning started, did you think about moving the timeline for middle school and high school, and is that even feasible given everything that needs to happen? I just had to ask given his comments earlier.
Yeah, no, I'm not recommending that at all. I think that the phased approach gives us a chance to figure out what's going on at the elementary school, gives us a chance to see how transportation is going to work. We don't have all of the equipment we need for the high school program right now. The schools are still in the process of setting up the classrooms, making sure the secondary schools provide a different kind of challenge than the elementary schools, and I wouldn't want to rush it.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Kalish?
Thank you. So I would love to hear from the administration about how you're approaching some of the areas that Dr. Rubin highlighted earlier as some of the riskier moments for potential transmission, specifically lunchtime for the high school and high school students and staff members at all levels, and hallway traffic between periods at the secondary level.
Right. Well, Dr. McGloin spoke a little bit about the fact that at the secondary school, which is used to a lunch and learn, which is an hour in the middle of the day, and the kids sort of use it like a college campus, and they're all over the place. They're going to have a more traditional lunchtime situation. Elementary school with the AM/PM eliminates the lunch, which was a little tricky. Middle school is going to be making use of auditoriums and those kinds of situations. For the hallway, I'm more familiar with what the high school, because that was the one that worried me a little bit. I don't know if Mr. Weinstein, Mr. Hughes want to take a brief moment to talk about that.
Sure. Hi, everybody. We are working with our health and safety team and talking about transition in the hallways. What you will find in both high schools are one-way directions, stairways that only go either up or down, and you'll find that we're going to release students at different points to try to stagger when they're going to be in the hallways together. And our health and safety team are still currently working on that. We have a large cohort of teachers and administrators working through that using the district's health and safety plan as a guide.
I don't know, we talk briefly, Mrs. Stout and Mr. Hall, about the middle school.
Very similar at the middle school as well. So we have a building health and safety team at each of our 10 campuses, teachers working closely in collaboration with school administrators. Our custodial team is phenomenal. So, all the up and down staircases and stairways are marked at present, in the process of marking seating in the cafeteria and also in the auditorium. 6 feet socially distanced seating arrangements for students.
And I don't know if Jen, you want to talk about that before we talk about the elementary school. Just as an aside, one of the staff development techniques I used for the administrators last summer was we showed a portion of the film Up the Down Staircase. It has a whole new vision to it now. Jen?
Yeah, each of the building principals has safety plans that are unique to their buildings. As you already heard, the lunch is not going to be an issue. They are going to, go through with, for example, kindergarten is our first group coming back. They're going to all meet with Terry Quinlan and go through some of the nuts and bolts of just even classroom instruction. Obvious things like, making sure that students have their own sets of manipulatives to work from. We send home, big bags of them to go home in the summer so that students have them for remote learning. They're going to bring them back, and those will be the ones that they're using in the classroom so that they're not sharing. So those types of steps have been taken to make sure that we're minimizing shared materials and risk. Transitions will be minimal because students are mostly in their classrooms. Special areas hallways have plans for transitions. One of the things we're also exploring is the possibility of continuing with some special areas remotely. If it's determined that helps to create contact in the at-home part of the day, it also minimizes the changing of classes. So things like that are being looked at right now.
Great. Ms. Finger?
Thank you. Just one final question. Is there any talk of making an attempt to integrate in some way the kids who are learning remotely, who have signed up to learn remotely for the year?
The kids who have signed up for LMVA right now are invited in for morning meeting. The other kids have their own. Jen, you want to talk about that?
The Lmsd at home and just those kids that at this point are not going to get the opportunity because they've been, that's what they've said.
I don't think has that been a discussion point?
No, I guess if you're asking, are we connecting them back with their home building, that part, they're definitely having morning meetings and developing cohort and community together. That's a through line, and that's a priority across all our programs. So they're working on connection through the morning meeting and LMSD at home. In LMVA, the students are invited to participate in the morning meetings.
Thank you. So I think that is, for the rest of the board, I will ask one more question and then I have a comment. My question is specific to the athletic plan. My understanding is that the Central League and this recommendation is focused on fall sports. And I'm wondering if there has been consideration for winter sports like basketball, wrestling, swimming and diving, squash, if that is work in progress and if there's any update around those at this point.
Tom, Jason, or the president of the Central League, Mr. Hughes?
Sure. At this time, no, there's been no discussion yet of winter sports. The whole focus is being on how we can implement fall sports safely. Waiting for a little more guidance from PIAA on where we could go. The ADs I know have had several meetings on that, so I don't know if they want to speak specifically to anything for the winter, but we haven't, as the principals level of the league, we haven't had discussions on the fall yet, on the winter yet.
We haven't gotten too deep into the winter. Our plan is to see where the fall took us, and then I'm sure after this starts, we will then start to look at the winter and see what becomes of the fall season.
Great, thank you. So I just wanted to take a moment and thank everyone for all of the hard work that's gone on towards this. My take since the summer has been, we're in a really difficult situation, sort of, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and the whole concept of what is the least worst option in front of us. And I just want to thank all of everyone for all the time and energy that's put in to reviewing lots of different options and really weighing the pros and cons of those different options. Because I really feel that there's a lot of compromise that we have to make, because there is no perfect solution at this point. We need to do the best that we can and acknowledge that those compromises have to be made, as much as we might not want to make them. So I just wanted to take a moment and thank everyone for their time and energy and thoughtfulness through this whole process. So next on our agenda are the committee meeting reports, and then I wanted to follow quickly and just let everyone know that the public comment audience recognition will follow the committee meeting reports. So I will, we've been at this for quite a while already this evening. So if there's opportunity, if during the reports anyone wants to try to condense a little bit of the information, that is perfectly fine. But I will start with Mr. Mooring with the September 9th Curriculum Committee review.
Thank you. The Curriculum Committee met on September 9th to provide an update on the LMSD summer programming and review contracts that were pre-approved by Superintendent Copeland under the board-approved COVID Emergency Act. Dr. Gaudioso and her team provided a comprehensive review of the summer programming, noting that the purpose was to engage, enrich, and strengthen foundations for success. Over the summer, LMSD served 1,255 students. Parents and teachers noted that through survey responses, that there were some very tangible improvements from the spring to the summer. In summary, noting that it included individualized supports for student learning, instructional program pilots, opportunities for improved student engagement, and opportunities to streamline parent communications. The success of the summer programming also significantly informed the district's approach to LMSD's virtual start in terms of both approaches for learning and approaches for family supports. The team also reported out on the considerable amount of work done over the summer focused on anti-racism. An important point raised was the approach that the curriculum department adopted related to this work, noting that anti-racism work is a stance, not a task, meaning that they are not looking to check a box, but to take a stance on addressing these issues in LMSD's curriculum. Some of the team noted that the curricular entry points include adding or amplifying content to remedy absences or erasures, and addressing multidimensionality and perspective in what was already taught. At the elementary level, school level, they are focused on anti-racism work has emerged from LMSD's work on issues of cultural proficiency over the years. The team also noted that the work being pursued is building on a solid foundation of efforts that are already underway including Second Step, No Place for Hate, Cultural Proficiency for Kids, Teaching Tolerance, Social Justice Standards, multi-school pilot lessons, and spring lesson refinement and development. The anti-racism curriculum going forward will be pursued using a two-pronged approach. The first being cultural proficiency and anti-racism lesson and articulation and refinement, and secondly, social studies lesson review and revision. The summer program's update presentation with the full details can be found in the Curriculum Committee agenda from September 9th, 2020 in Board Docs. And that concluded our meeting. And the next Curriculum Committee meeting will be held on Tuesday, October 6th at 8:30 p.m. a.m. I'm sorry. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mooring. Next is the September 11th Policy Committee meeting report. Ms. Ackman.
Sorry, I had to get off my mute. During the September 11th meeting, the board's policy committee continued its review of policies and administrative regulations. There were a few updates. The impact of COVID-19 may impact a number of policies and procedures. However, it's recommended that policies be suspended rather than revised because hopefully there will be no long-standing changes. In addition, the district's health and safety plans allows for suspension of previous policy if necessary. The Achievement Imperative Task Force began work on a district equity policy in the fall and was originally on the policy agenda in December 2019, but paused due to COVID. The newly formed ad hoc committee on equity and anti-racism will review this and other policies in partnership with the PA School Board Association. In addition, Policy 235, Student Rights and Responsibilities, will also be reviewed in tandem with the equity policy as it includes the Student Code of Conduct. The district's conflict of interest policies have been summarized for staff reference, including a single landing page with easy access to appropriate forms. This will allow for simpler access and ability to track. There were no second readings this month. In terms of first readings, we reviewed policy AR 246, harassment, bullying, and hazing, and policy AR 346, 446, and 546, prohibited harassment by and of employees and other members of the school community, were revised to reflect changes to Title 9 at the federal level and the PA Department of Education regulations regarding sexual harassment, including the separation of sexual harassment from other types of harassment. The addition of the coordinator to manage the different definitions of harassment and subsequent procedures and record keeping has been incorporated into policy, which will reduce the burden on staff and students. Policy 806 for child abuse was reviewed. This policy supports mandatory reporters and no changes were recommended. Policy 808, nutritional services, free and reduced price meals for students, and policy AR 809, contracted services, were reviewed with no significant changes recommended. Policy AR 811, district vehicles, use of GPS systems, was reviewed and consideration will be given to including non-bus vehicles to the policy. Policy 804, copyrighted materials, was updated since its review in 2005. Although these laws have not substantially changed, the types of materials to which they apply have, and the updates reflect those changes. Policy 815, smoking tobacco usage, was updated to include electronic smoking and a more precise definition of tobacco products in line with legal definitions. The next policy committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, October 9th at 8:30 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ackman. Next is the September 16th Finance Committee meeting report from Ms. Robinson.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. The Finance Committee met on September 16th, 2020 to discuss the financing of the new middle school. The plan called for a second phase of borrowing to start after the bids were awarded, which occurred June 2020. PFM, the firm that we work with to prepare and hold out the bonds for sale, presented the next phase of financing for the new middle school project. Also presented was a potential refunding of the Series A bonds of 2012. The first topic was the remaining amount of financing for the new middle school, which is estimated at $63 million. Two scenarios were presented, the base case and option one. The budget impact of both is nearly identical. In base case, Lmsd would borrow $33 million this fall and $30 million next year. This scenario had the benefits of matching the funding to the draws and potentially taking advantage of possible decrease in interest rates in the future. Long-term tax-exempt interest rates are near or at an all-time low. However, it is also a risk that the interest rates could rise higher and there would be slightly higher cost of issuance as there would be two borrowings, so the cost would be doubled. Option one was then presented involving a one-time $63 million borrowing this fall. This scenario has the benefits of reduced interest rate risk and reduced costs of issuance and administrative time. After consideration of both scenarios, the administration recommended option one, to have one $63 million borrowing in 2020. The benefits are that it reduces interest rate risk by locking in nearly all time low interest rates, reducing administrative time and lower issuance costs. PFM then presented the second topic of the refunding opportunity for Series A bonds of 2012, which based on the current interest environment would result in approximately $2.3 million in one-time savings. The earliest a tax-exempt refunding can settle is 90 days prior to the call date, which is May 15th of 2021, or anytime after February 15th, 2021 for the refunding of the Series A bonds of 2012. It is recommended that we pursue the refunding of the bonds to close after February 15th, 2021. The PFM presentation with the full details can be found in the Finance Committee meeting agenda from September 16th in board docs. That concluded our meeting, and future dates have not been set, but will be publicized when available. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. And then finally, our September 17th Facilities and Purchasing Committee review, Mr. Lee.
Thank you. Sorry, I was on mute. This is my report of the Facilities and Purchasing Committee meeting September 17th at 8:30 a.m. The following agenda items were discussed and recommended for approval by the committee for discussion and vote during our meeting today. First, we reviewed and recommended for approval the list of bills. We reviewed and recommended for approval the following district contracts. Renewals for the following student services providers. Person-driven solutions for counseling of students with disabilities at $25 per quarter hour. Reggie Candio with CCIU for psychology services at $732.32 per day. New contracts for the following student services providers: Jennifer Hetzke, apologies about pronunciation, with CCIU for psychology services at $732.32 per day. MCIU will provide certified school psychologists for student evaluation services at $660 per day. 2 subscriptions to support music education during COVID: Make Music for $7,860 and Music First for $14,069.20. District subscription to student engagement platform Pear Deck for $19,530. Service contract with the Improve Group to perform strategic evaluation and planning with achievement teams, $52,395. 3-year subscription with EAB Global for access to their district leadership forum, $26,500, $27,750, and $29,063 for the 3-year subscription. We reviewed and recommended for approval the following items from the purchasing report. Fenco to replace a section of fencing around Amherst Field, $18,380. Singer will provide food service transport carts to support safe lunch distribution, $33,916.57. We reviewed and recommended for approval the following additional agenda items. A contract amendment with Valgo Transportation. There will be an additional $5 per one-way student trip increase for additional COVID-related cleaning. An order with Presidio Network Solutions for 10 access points, wireless access points. They'll be used as spares, $9,294.57. Work order with Blackmore and Associates to perform quality inspections during the new middle school construction, not to exceed amount of $187,842. Amendment to a prior work order with Shepherd Restoration Engineers related to the masonry restoration at Penn Valley Elementary. The increase is for a not to exceed amount of $4,946. 2 change orders were recommended. One change order for Watt Services for additional work related to the building pad at the new middle school, $240,000. Change order for S.J. Thomas Company, that's to install additional landscape screening around the bus parking located at the former St. Justin's parking lot, $12,223.65. We also reviewed and recommended for approval the administration's recommendation to defer the planned MCPC enrollment projection study until fall of 2021 due to uncertainty around COVID impacts on enrollment. We also received 2 project updates, one on the new middle school. Additional blasting work will be needed to support the installation of utility trenches at the new middle school. That work will continue through mid-October. But the contractor will make accommodations to make sure no blasting occurs during Yom Kippur. And lastly, we received an update on air quality, which Mr. Copeland also provided earlier about the additional options being considered for reducing airborne pathogens in schools. Next Facilities and Purchasing Committee meeting will be on Thursday, October 15th, 8:30 a.m.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Next, we'll move on to audience recognition. Public comment will now be taken via the chat feature. The time will be set for 10 minutes and the chat feature will be open. Please start with your name and where you reside within the district, and comments will be read by our solicitor. We ask that you submit 1 question or comment per person to allow enough time for other comments. Please make sure that you provide your full name and address within the district or your comment will not be shared. Thank you.
I think we're back.
Yes,
Shall I
we
begin?
are.
Shall I begin?
Yes, please.
Okay. Again, reading only those comments where the person listed both their name and where they live in the district, and actually have a comment. First is Lindsay Wetmore of Haverford. Why have you created such a scheduling nightmare for parents with kids in elementary and higher ed? Why not just choose the same schedule for all grades, 2 a week or 5 half days? What a scheduling and transportation mess. Pick one schedule and stick with it. You have made our lives a wreck with this. Working parents need older kids around to help and or have limited time for being available for driving back and forth to school or being available for bus pickup and drop off. And now you've created a need for even more childcare. This went from bad to worse. We are going to end up on Xanax by the time Lmsb board is done with this Mr. Toad's wild ride. Next is Melissa Richmond, Kinwood Elementary. Do you plan to follow recommendations for pre-K to 12 schools following identification of cases of COVID-19 found at the website of the PDE website?
Is this volume all right?
Yes.
Okay. Lauren Schwartz, Bala Kinwood, will the AM/PM plan transportation be provided to potting locations, childcare locations such as the JCC or right at school? I believe this to be essential for working families. Next is Michelle Detweiler, Wynwood. Thank you in advance for approving the additional plantings, alternate 2 section, recommended by the Penn Valley Civic Association for the new bus parking lot at Welsh Valley Middle School. Kate Legg, Wynwood, what is keeping specials from being during their home time? Next, Linda Katz, Penn Valley. I live very close to the new Welsh Valley bus site. It is beyond disturbing that this site is in a residential neighborhood as already bears more than its share of burdens of service to the broader community, has been designated for this purpose. That said, I beg the board approve all of the additional landscaping in the alternate 2 section and more if possible to block the view of bus parking. This has been done elsewhere in Lower Merion, for example, at Harriton. It is imperative that the board provide our neighborhood with the same kind of camouflage that exists at other bus parking sites. Sage Myers, Penn Win. Is there any way to decrease the amount of asynchronous learning for elementary school? Jen Gilbert, Villanova. It was stated that Fridays are for teacher meetings, professional development, PLCs, etc. If teachers are teaching synchronously from 9 to 12 and 1:50 to 3:35, when will those meetings take place? Teachers are not being given enough time to prepare for this enormous workload. Next, Nancy Braudo, Wynwood. It seems as though in the hybrid model, students will be in front of a computer for longer stretches of time than they are now. It seems that for at least 3 days per week, they will be sitting at Zoom for 7 hours. Julia DeTure in Bala Kinwood, thank you for all your hard work on this. Is there a way to move specials in ES to the time when the kids are at home? It will help give an extra hour of live class and also allow more time for core subjects when live and in person. Hugh Ehrenberg, Penn Valley, what allowances are being made for Monday, Wednesday splits to make up for Monday holidays? Is there consideration to maintaining school day on those days? Next, Abby Cohen.
Mr. I can, let me just try and, I've got a flavor and so the issue was, as Mr. Lee mentioned, about changing from the hybrid model that we had to the model that we're recommending now. We recognize that this is a change which is going to cause difficulty for some parents, and we tried very hard to get around that and just couldn't find a way to make it work. And we are looking for ways to actively support working families. We did open up the district administration building for right at school. That's undersubscribed and could have more people in it. In terms of the getting kids to pods, we can only maybe make that work if it's within the location. So if there's a group of students who are at JCC but they're in Gladwin, that's not going to work. We wouldn't have the transportation to make that work. I think those are some of the high points I just wanted to hit.
Okay. Abby Cohen, Bala Kinwood. How will distancing and spacing work in kindergarten classroom with 17 children and 1 teacher? Amy and Ben Lester, Marion Station. What changes have been made to de-densify kindergarten classes? In the last board meeting, Superintendent Copeland discussed adding staff to reduce the number of children in each kindergarten class to maintain distance. Could you please provide an update? Thank you.
Let me provide an update for that since you had 2 in a row. So yes, I apologize for not having that as part of the presentation. So what we're looking to do is if there are 16 or 17 students in a class, what we're looking to do is to have either an instructional assistant or a building sub or somebody else take on a rotational basis a number of students out of the class so that there's only 12 students in the class at any one given time. Our kindergarten classes were overstaffed. So for the most part, I don't know, Megan, how many have like 17 in a class? What's the average numbers do you call?
There's a few at one school that have either 16 or 17. Some have below 12, and the average is probably around 13, maybe.
So we're working hard to staff that as in the best way we can. But we felt it was incredibly important, even though that's not a perfect solution. We felt that to do a hybrid model with kindergarten, where you're taking a half of a half, was just making it that much rougher for our youngest learners. So this seemed to be, again, not the best way to do it, but the best compromise we could come up with.
Okay. Next is Tony Sackstetter. I can't pronounce that. Clyde Road. What is the status of HVAC upgrades? What standards are being set, and will engineering reports for each building be made public? Next, Peter Solderich, Haverford. For the hybrid elementary plan, it seems that you are saying at the same time that aerosol in-air transmission risk is low because of most of the virus is in droplets that fall quickly. But at the same time, saying that AMPM hybrid is safe because we don't need to deep clean shared surfaces between cohorts because the virus is mainly spread via air. These two claims seem inconsistent. I have been told by Lmsd teachers that in elementary rooms, 1/2 of all desks have already been removed, meaning the AMPM cohorts will be sharing surfaces with only an hour between uses. Is this sufficient? Please advise. Excuse me.
Well, while you're reading through the, I was going to say, while you're reading through those, I'll ask Terry to talk up and Jim Lill to talk about the cleaning, and Jim the HVAC.
I'll take the HVAC question first. In terms of our HVAC systems, those systems were designed to provide ventilation rates for a full occupancy of that school. So you have to picture that our ventilation rates are already up here and built and code compliant for a full school. We're only occupying it at half occupancy, and ventilation is primarily driven by occupancy. So by default, with a fully ventilated building with only half occupancy, we basically double the amount of ventilation per occupant. Also, to expand on what Dr. Rubin had mentioned before about a window of opportunity, as we move out of September and into October, outdoor temperatures and also outdoor humidity is starting to drop. So as we start seeing days where the highs are somewhere between the 50s and 60 degrees Fahrenheit and relative humidity is around 40-50% on cooler, drier days, we can actually use that air to cool and condition the building, which means more fresh air with both increased ventilation and help to maintain indoor temperatures in a free cooling mode.
Right, so, and the air exchanges per hour?
Excuse me?
How many air exchanges per hour?
Currently, the typical classroom has about 7 to 8 room air changes per hour.
And in terms of cleaning, I know that we're going to be, since we're going to have, we were going to hire a company to help support the cleaning, and we're going to use some of our cafeteria workers to do that, to reduce the number of people that we bring in from the cleaning, but also keep them working, correct? Okay.
Correct. The interstate maintenance starts on October 5th. That was approved by the board back during the summer.
Okay. Terry, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just that the deep cleaning does occur at the end of the day, but that does not mean that cleaning doesn't occur between cohorts. We're still going to be wiping down surfaces in the classrooms in between the arrival of the next cohort, and keeping in mind that this is a more minor way of the way that COVID is transmitted. It's still important to do it, but a deep cleaning in between cohorts isn't recommended, but we will still be cleaning.
Thank you. Mr. Roos?
Kirsten Sams, Norberth. I have a kindergartner and first grader attending Belmont Hills. We have fortunately adjusted well to virtual at this point, and I wonder what options, if any, are available to parents who opted for in-person instruction but have since changed their thinking on this. Next, Navnet Miller Gladwin. Why won't you notify the full class if there's a positive case in the class? Similar precautions are taken for lice, strep, etc. So notifying regarding COVID seems normal. This will also help with metrics tracking. Next, Linda Mullins, 19004. Will people be able to switch into LMSD at home? We were told that AMPN was not an option. We would have chosen at home if it was. Next is Micah Sneed. Ardmore, homework should not be canceled. It is not required, homework should be canceled. It is not required for health or safety. I have not seen how or if the district has considered the current modeling for election day or when a decision be made if LMSD property can be used as polling sites. I'm confused as to my understanding was the recommendation from CHOP was to prioritize younger children in person, yet this plan clearly prioritizes older children. Next, Miriam Vinci, Bala Kinwood. I applaud the administration for reevaluating all hybrid options and choosing to bring elementary kids into the buildings for 4 or 5 continuous half days. I truly believe this is the best option for our young learners. Thank you. One comment I have is that I was surprised to see specials as part of the in-person school day schedule. I'd like to see specials done remotely and the in-person teaching time be focused on the core curriculum. Thank you again.
One of the things that's happening is more people are looking for LMSD at home. That's causing class sizes to rise in that area, and we're trying to deal with the staffing of that. And so for the people who want to move into that, if we're going to do that and keep class sizes, we're going to have to try and figure out a way to do that because our staffing has become a problem. It'd be difficult to just hire somebody and then put them into a program where our staff who's doing remote learning has had such significant training.
Robin Knight, Winwood. It would be great if the specials could be moved to the asynchronous times for the elementary kids. I'm really worried how far behind we are falling, and a focus on the core subjects in class may help. Really pleased with the half-day schedule. Next, Christina Chang, Penn Valley. Does the hybrid plan envision sufficient spacing on buses, or are parents still encouraged to drive and pick up? I'm imagining a very long car line, which is impactful to a workday. Next is Robin Gari, Bryn Mawr. What are the options for families who are still uncomfortable with in-school learning or with the partial day schedules? Next, Lauren Fulmer, Bala Kinwood. My question is in regard to the elementary school schedule and the inclusion of specials. Given the limited time our children will have for face-to-face instruction, along with the need to limit exposure as much as possible, could you please consider shifting the time for specials to outside of the in-person instruction and to the other part of this day? The kids could still Zoom in as they do today. Next, Sharon Buckholz, Penn Valley. What is the district doing to protect staff and to cover classes if a teacher gets sick and to support staff if they need time to recover? Or are they going to have to take sick days knowing and recognizing that they are most at risk and are bravely willing to come to work and risk their lives to educate our children? Another repeat people. Dominic Pasqualini, Winwood. For elementary schools, will we be able to choose between attending AM or PM sessions? Next, Alicia Carr, Bryn Mawr. What are the planned mitigation protocols for bus transportation? Next, Alana Weinstein, Winwood. 2 questions regarding the newly proposed hybrid model at the elementary level. Can cohorts be requested for childcare purposes? Is it possible for specials to be conducted synchronous during the half-day home portion so elementary students can use all teacher FaceTime for core academics? Elizabeth Fulgia, Belmont Hills. Will the elementary students be permitted to have a snack while in school? And if so, what will the protocol be in kindergarten? Next, Jeanette Fisher, Belmont Hills. In regards to sports, more specifically football, how are we supposed to wait to see if things improve when every other Central League team -1, Upper Darby, will already have a schedule and be playing, and the 123 years of the Radnor game will be lost?
Talk a little bit about buses. Buses, we are going to make sure that we've sanitized high-touch areas. We are going to be asking people to, if they can find another way, there's going to be a survey that goes out to ask people if they can find another way besides putting their students on a bus. We would like them to do that. Also, we have mapped out several zones of walking that would reduce the number of students on a bus if someone could choose. What we've done is we've taken that information and we've given it to the township and asked them to investigate getting more crossing guards The crossing guards are paid equally by the township and the school district, but they're employed by the township. So we are looking to do that.
Howard Sherman, Penwood Elementary. Would someone please clarify what will happen if a child in elementary school reports a positive case? Will the entire class be notified or only the children sitting within 6 feet of the child? If the latter, does that mean there will be effectively not notification as the classroom seating will enforce 6 feet or greater of social distancing? Next is Robert Krupka, Winwood. How will you determine which classes are AM and PM cohorts? It is known that kids down learn as well as, it is known that kids down don't learn as well in the afternoon. Are there plans to compensate the families who have PM, such as flipping the schedule after a certain amount of time? Jane Broderson, Penn Valley. Thank you as always for your service. Our family, along with hundreds of neighbors, worry about the added traffic impact of the bus depot at Welsh Valley. We already shoulder more bus traffic than any other neighborhood due to our close proximity to not one, but two Lower Merion School District schools. Is the bus depot at Welsh Valley a done deal? Hope not. If so, what can be done to mitigate the neighborhood impact? I believe the Penn Valley Civic Association recommended more than $12,000 in landscaping, but I could be wrong.
And that's on the agenda for discussion.
All right. Several more repeat commenters. Carolyn Gosweiler, Ardmore, given the district has completely changed the logistics of the hybrid return and changed the criteria that has been previously articulated for deciding when it is appropriate to return, the district needs to allow families to opt into or out of the LMSD at home in time for the start of the hybrid option. Will LMSD in good faith provide this flexibility to parents? Marla Disson, Belmont Hills, with the extremely limited in-person time for elementary schools, why waste an entire period of a special when that is something that can easily be done during an asynchronous day while kids are virtual? I'd rather the in-person time be maximized otherwise. Elizabeth Powers, Narberth, will the new hybrid proposal provide more asynchronous instruction for elementary students than the original two-day hybrid proposal? My understanding was that students at home would be connected to in-school students throughout the day in the two-day model. I'm most interested in my child, admittedly a third grader who can handle technology, receiving teacher-led synchronous instruction than whether it happens in or out of school. Therese Dennis, Marion Station, impossible in Ballackinwood Middle School. The Molinos, Winwood, let the kids play their sports. It is their decision whether or not they want to take the risk. And with the Central League and PIA's permission, already the kids deserve to play with all the hard work they put in. Brandlin DeRosa, Ardmore, for parents with need, will there be any process to request? Doesn't finish. Melanie Wolfson, Bryn Mawr, I would like to know the rationale behind why middle school is not being live streamed when high school is. Why are our children fully asynchronous on the 2 home days? Also, if they need to miss school on their in-person days due to illness or out of social and health responsibility, even if just mildly ill, they should have some ability to view or participate with their class during the live days.
Let me ask either Alexis or I know Sarah Stout was articulate on that issue of the streaming, the issues of privacy and discipline and those kinds of things, and just handling it. The middle school had some real concerns about the streaming, as I understand.
I can speak to it.
Sure they're unmuted. Okay.
Yeah, I can speak to it for a minute. I wasn't sure if Sarah was going to jump in or not. So although we're not anticipating streaming, we do anticipate having checks where the students will be participating in classrooms synchronously during those days. So we believe that's the best way. Streaming isn't necessarily the only method that we should be using, honestly, for our non-in-person instruction days. It really depends on the tool that's appropriate for the learning that's happening at that time. So we're looking at breakout rooms, we're looking at small group instruction, and we're looking at checks with the teacher during the class period. So there will be time for students that are at home in the middle school to work with teachers in their classrooms.
Okay. Carrie Prestrunk, Gladwin, please explain the process for a positive COVID case in a classroom. How will it be handled? What happens if a cohort or teacher will need to quarantine or test positive? Additionally, will there ever be a swap of AM, PM, and hybrid model as performance for young children may be determined by the hour of the day? Next, Gillian Johnson, Ardmore, can you please advise regarding the status of the issues with the application teachers use to input assignments and grades so that they are visible in PowerSchool? What is the issue, and is there an estimated time on getting this resolved? Thanks. Alvar Sosar Narberth, will there be a deep clean between morning and afternoon sessions when that is appropriate? You mentioned that nighttime cleaning was sufficient, but if there are sick individuals in the morning session, then a nighttime cleaning would occur after the afternoon session has been exposed, correct? Perhaps limiting switching between classrooms might be prudent to consider also. For example, not 8 bells. Thank you. Next is Lisa Maslow Kinwood with regard to the proposed elementary school hybrid schedule, why are specialists being included in the in-person school day? Can specialists be taught during virtual learning times synchronously at home to allow for more time for academic instruction on the days when students are in school? Next, Valeria Pukas Winwood, when a child has to quarantine or the entire class quarantines, will that child be offered a remote learning? Will that class go to a remote learning? Jen Cohen Winwood, I believe that in order to maximize in-person learning at the ES level, it should be elementary school level, it should be focused on core subjects. It's disappointing that my son will only have synchronous math instruction twice a week and yet have gym in person. I think that's a big waste of precious in-person time. Next, Jennifer and Michael Kelly, Penn Valley, please approve the Alt-2 landscaping plan that was provisionally approved during the Facilities Committee meeting last week. The buses parked at Harriton and Lower Marion High School are so well screened with landscaping, fences, and walls that they are difficult to find. The neighbors of Welsh Valley Middle School would appreciate the same consideration, and the Alt-2 plan is a step forward in that direction.
Could I just ask Terry to talk again about the notification of what happens when a student is or student or teacher?
Right. Well, we would immediately contact the Office of Public Health in Montgomery County, and they confirm the case, and we support them in helping to identify people that are close contacts, whether that be students or staff, and then it's determined who will need to be notified. Although their criteria for close contact is within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more, practically that could mean that an entire class would be quarantined because it's really difficult to tease out just how much time people have spent with each other. So there would likely be, a larger quarantine if it's in a classroom setting. So that is done individually with each case, and we would be, sending information to those parents and to the staff members who work with those students.
So logistically, actually, a full class quarantine is easier than 1 or 2 students. We would have to find a situation where they could be in a class for a period of time.
Yeah.
All right. I won't read any more questions out. Comments asking the same question then. Rachel Dolsky Gladwin, first, thank you for pulling together this revised plan. I think it's great, and I'm excited particularly that elementary students will be able to return to the buildings 4 days a week. My question is, over the summer, the district was encouraging parents not to use the buses if we return to school. With the hybrid model, is the expectation that busing will be distanced and safe, or are parents still being encouraged to find alternative means of transporting their children? Next, Lorena Lewis, Glen Arbor Drive. Did the district take into consideration single and 2 working parent homes when deciding on an AM/PM approach? How exactly are working parents supposed to manage an AM/PM schedule and find alternative childcare for half days and manage transportation issues related thereto, especially when scheduling was previously based on a fully day hybrid model? Next is Brandon Levitt of 306 Fairview Road. Why not have the elementary school teachers teach as they currently are, with half the kids there in the AM and half in PM, so all synchronous for them? Next is Ruth Jenkins Winwood. What are the safety protocols on the buses? Will masks be provided for each student each day they are in school? Do the coaches wear masks? Brandon DeRosa, any process to state a need for AM or PM cohorts?
So that's come up a couple of times. It would be difficult to try and match that up, but I know people have already asked principals about AM and PM, and I think they do it the way they would do any other request and see if they could do it. If they can grant it, they grant it. If not, I guess they can't.
Lori Robbins, Winwood, how will sanitizing be conducted between elementary AM and PM cohorts? How is this planned for middle and high schools safer than elementary schools, specifically regarding eating lunch in the school building, given they are at higher risk than elementary age students? Next is Blair Adler Ardmore, and I'm just a reminder, I'm skipping over ones that commenters have already submitted a comment. Blair Adler Ardmore, I'm concerned about the apparent lack of synchronous instruction the middle school's kids receive on the days they are home. Check-ins and touch points during the day will not keep them engaged. Is there a reason middle school can't have the same level of synchronous learning as the high school? Under the proposed plan, my middle schooler appears to have more synchronous learnings now as a 100% virtual. Thank you. Vanessa Cohen Balakinwood. Hello. For the days where middle school and high school students are at home during the hybrid model, what will learning look like for them? Will middle school and high school students have 3 full days of asynchronous learning, or will they be expected to watch a live stream of their class on their days at home? How come the half-day, 5-day-a-week option was not available to middle school and high school students? Howard Patak, Balakinwood. I believe the AM-PM hybrid model is the worst method possible. It extends the day, likely ends up with less to learning time for the kids, is chaotic for parents, and all logistics, creates multiple starts and stops for kids, etc. Simply sending them to school or staying home for the day is much simpler all around and more consistent for everyone involved. Any AM-PM option is a poor model and should be removed from the decision-making process for the schooling of any child that has a traditional full day. Ken Starr, Winwood. As the parent of 2 elementary school children, I am deeply concerned. Not only am I profoundly worried about the health and safety of other kids and the adults who care for them, but putting that aside, if that's even possible, why are we putting all this effort into a window during which time kids' newly established routines will be completely disrupted in the hopes they get 2 hours and 50 minutes a day, 4 days a week of in-person classroom time that may or may not be safe, may or may not be sustainable, may or may not be better than the current problem, per Mr. Copeland's explanation, when instead we could work to fortify our virtual curriculum even more, potentially adding some safe in-person options for kids to meet their teachers, etc. Why are we doing this, and why are we doing this now? The focus should be on the students who absolutely need in-person instruction. I say this knowing that all kids would benefit from socialization and less screen time when safe. Next is Jessica Rosen, please, Gladwin. Her comment is, please explain the rationale of starting sports, which greatly increases exposure risk, jeopardizes the health and safety of our community, and further jeopardizes the opportunity for in-person education of our students. Next is Adam and Carolyn Cutler, Winwood. Resubmitting with name and address. We've heard a lot about bringing back sports and interleague play at the high school level. What about extracurriculars like Science Olympiad or Marinite, where students largely sit at desks and have minimal contact and much lower risk? Why aren't those activities being given the same priority or consideration as sports? Amy Reese, Ardmore, 5th grade student. The revised plan for elementary is very disappointing. Not only have you modified earlier hybrid plans, you have done a complete 180 and changed anything that we as parents have been planning for. I'm eager to have the kids back in person learning, but I have to say that currently the virtual day has found us to have engagement from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. with a mix of class interaction, work time, and teacher instruction. The hybrid model drastically reduces this and puts a greater burden on parents having to oversee much more asynchronous learning. Parents who have been able to return to work 2 to 3 days a week now need to be home every day for childcare and school instruction and oversight, and older siblings are often on different schedules and unable to help provide support. Now the families and students returning to school the soonest have to begin making alternate plans for the return to school. Please consider these factors for the elementary. Next, Jim and Amy Palmer, Penn Valley, strongly support the additional landscaping known as alternate 2 so that plantings go in this fall. Kimberly Neff, Penn Valley. The CDC says school administration should acknowledge that COVID-19 policies are intended to mitigate, not eliminate risks. Dr. Rubin said we have to rely on strong mitigation plans and safety protocols. How can you set expectations for those that are worried about the occurrence of even one positive case in the district and ensure them that this is a manageable risk? Next is Amari Littman, Penn Valley. I am for option 2 for Welsh Valley Bus Depot screening. I am displeased with Bus Depot at this location overall. Lars Beck, Marion Station. We have one son at Ballacuma Middle and one son at Marion Elementary. I support students going back, but I think it should happen sooner, and with 6th and 9th graders going back sooner. I have many questions and comments, but my primary one is this. It seems that the hybrid model will be very challenging for students when they're at home with asynchronous instruction. In particular, I believe that the amount of material teachers will be able to deliver to students will decrease significantly, making it very tough for students to learn what they need to learn in their given grade. Why have you chosen not to live stream classes to students who are at home? Other schools and school districts are doing and planning this, and it seems that this would enable a faster pace along the scope and sequence for each subject in each grade. Thank you. Aaron Ward, Marion. Dr. Rubin talked about the trauma to kids with all the adjustments that children are having to make, and with a new hybrid model during an open window that may soon close and put us back in virtual. The emotional toll especially may fall on younger students who can't understand the back and forth. Has the district thought about a fully virtual model through the end of the year to give some time to reassess the situation, as some neighboring school districts are doing, i.e. Upper Marion, to avoid the potential of switching back and forth between models and how it will affect the children? Julia Glass, Narberth. Why is live streaming from the classroom not an option for hybrid? Carol Hagan, Narberth. 2 high school students. I thank Peter Lee for his comment regarding the impact of changing plans on parents and guardians. Dr. Rubin has consistently drawn a distinction between the relative risks and benefits of returning early grade versus upper grade students. I would appreciate hearing more about the educational quality and continuity for upper grade students in regard to the return to school at this time. Susan Sufi, Penn Valley. How will requests to go to Lower Marion School District at home be handled if families need to switch due to changes in health status at home, newly diagnosed immune compromised house member, or because the new hybrid schedule is not feasible? Nancy Paulo-Chronopoulou, Bala Kinwood. I would love to see some synchronous remote instruction in the elementary school. For example, the specials can be done remotely, but in a synchronous way. This way the kids will feel connected to the school even when they're home, and they will be using their school time for more challenging topics. And the last comment is Kim Lichtenstein at Penn Valley. With schools reopening, will there be a crossing guard posted at student drop-off areas? My reason for this question is there will probably be more students walking to school, as well as more parents dropping and picking up students each day. Will the 15-mile-an-hour signals be on for AM drop-off and pickup as well as PM drop-off and pickup? Thank you for taking my question and for all you are doing for Lmsb. And that concludes chat comments.
Thank you. Mr. Copeland, did you have any follow-up to anything?
Looking to see if there were any that were that I hadn't addressed before. There was one. Oh, the extracurricular program. We did indicate that we would look at extracurricular activities on a case-by-case basis. We are trying to find the staff if there are more, if Lmsb at home becomes a choice for folks. Right now, those classes are filling up, and the staffing for that is difficult. I think it was in August, the board approved us going to a different model for substitutes. We normally carry about 140 substitute teachers in the district. We're now down to 40. So the number of teachers nationwide is plummeting, and our area is not immune to that. So we're working really hard to see if we can find appropriate folks to come in and work with us.
Thank you. So now, prior to making a motion for a consent agenda, the following items are being pulled from the agenda for a separate vote. I'll quickly review them so people know, and then we will go through them individually. First is the approval of the amended health and safety plan. Second would be the approval of the amended athletics health and safety plan. Third is to approve the resolution to preliminarily proceed with financing for the new middle school. And fourth will be approve the change order for additional parking lot modifications at Welsh Valley Middle School. So first, Mr. Roos, could you please read the motion?
Yes, let me. For some reason, the screen's not sharing for me, but I can pull it off Board Docs. Okay, the administration recommends the Board of School Directors approves the amended LMSD Health and Safety Plan as attached, subject to the following additional revisions. The superintendent or designee is directed to further amend the plan to define an acceptable face covering as a mask that covers the nose and mouth and that is secured to the head with ties, straps, or loops over the ears, that does not include a plastic face shield or fabric covering that is wrapped around the lower face, example, gaiter, unless such a face covering is needed for a job-specific purpose. A mask can be worn with a variety of synthetic or natural fabrics, including cotton, silk, or linen. Face coverings may be factory-made, sewn by hand, improvised by household items, including but not limited to scarves, bandanas, t-shirts, sweatshirts, or towels. Valved face masks are not acceptable face coverings and may not be worn by students or staff as they may pose a health risk. Superintendent or designee is directed to further amend the plan to require mask wearing of all students, staff, and visitors at all times on school property, unless removed for limited approved purposes that include eating and mask breaks, provided that social distancing of 6 feet is achieved. Even when socially distanced of 6 feet, mask breaks should be for a duration of less than 10 minutes when conducted in groups. The LMSD Health and Safety Plan for Athletics addresses masks wearing in conjunction with LMSD athletics participation separately. The foregoing changes are not intended to supersede or otherwise modify any student's exemption from wearing a face covering due to medical condition or disabilities as documented in accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, or Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that precludes the wearing of a face covering. Eligibility and accommodations for a disability will be made in partnership with the student's healthcare provider, the school nurse, and the IEP or 5014. Similarly, staff must wear a face covering, mask, or face shield unless they have a medical or mental health condition or disability documented in accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act that precludes the wearing of a face covering in school. The board hereby authorizes the superintendent or designee to submit the health and safety plan to the Pennsylvania Department of Education in the form and manner prescribed by the Pennsylvania Department of Education to the extent that procedures outlined in the health and safety plan in its currently amended form or as amended in the future conflict with any applicable board policy or administrative regulation. The approval by the board of the health and safety plan and any amendments thereto shall also be considered approval of an exception to the policy or administrative regulation in conflict for the limited purpose of carrying out the provisions of the health and safety plan. The board authorizes the superintendent or his designee to take any actions the superintendent deems appropriate without further board approval to ensure the safety of students and staff to the extent authorized by law, irrespective of any policies that may be to the contrary, including minor revisions to the plan, which shall then be approved by the board at a subsequent meeting. Any decisions regarding the days and times for scheduling of hybrid instruction are delegated to the superintendent.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. And do I have a second?
Yeah.
Thank you. Ms. LaPera, I believe that we're going to do a roll call.
Yes. Ms. Finger?
Yes.
Ms. Kalish?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Mooring?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Ms. Ackman?
Yes.
And Ms. Klein?
Yes.
That's 9 in favor, motion passes.
Thank you. 8 in favor.
I'm so sorry, 8. I'm so used to saying 9. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so next is the approval of the amended athletics health and safety plan. Mr. Copeland, are you reading that or is Mr. Roos? Mr. Roos, sorry.
Mr. Ruth wrote them, so he's reading it.
You should.
The administration recommends that the Board of School Directors approves the amended Lmsb PIAA Athletic Health and Safety Plan as attached and authorizes the superintendent or designee to submit, if necessary, such plan to the Pennsylvania Department of Education in the form and manner prescribed by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. To the extent that the procedures outlined in the Athletic Health and Safety Plan in its currently amended form or as amended in the future conflict with any applicable board policy or administrative regulation, the approval by the board of the Health and Safety Plan and any amendments thereto shall also be considered approval of an exception to the policy or administrative regulation in conflict for the limited purpose of carrying out the provisions of the Health and Safety Plan. The board authorizes the superintendent or his designee to take any other actions the superintendent deems appropriate without further board approval to ensure that the safety and students and staff, to the extent authorized by law and irrespective of any policies that may be to the contrary, including minor revisions to the plan, which shall then be approved by the board at a subsequent meeting. Any further revisions to the athletic plan required to conform to the Central League's plans or recommendations are specifically authorized by the board.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the board? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. We have a second. And Ms. LaPera, I think that we were going to do another roll call.
Yes. Ms. Kalish?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Mooring?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Ms. Ackman?
Yes.
Ms. Finger?
Yes.
And Ms. Klein?
Yes.
Okay, we have 8 in favor and motion passes.
Great. Thank you. Next is to approve a resolution to preliminary proceed with financing for the new middle school. Mr. Orlando, can you please read the motion?
The administration recommends that the Board of School Directors approve the attached resolution, determine preliminary to proceed to issue 2 series of general obligation bonds for the school district to complete financing of the middle school project and to refund Series A of 2012 bonds, appointing an underwriter for the bonds and confirming the appointments of the financial advisor and bond counsel, and authorizing proper officers of this school district, the solicitor, bond counsel, and the financial advisor to take certain action.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I just wanted to take a moment and say that I had asked this to be pulled out because I believe it's a big project, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone recognized the thought and conversation that occurred at the Finance Committee, and I thank Ms. Robinson for summarizing that conversation. So I just wanted it to be acknowledged separately that the understanding that this is a big undertaking is clear with the board. So do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Is it great? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone not approve? Sorry. No. Okay. So all in favor, and the motion passes. And next is to approve the change order for additional parking lot modifications at Walsh Valley Middle School. Mr. Orlando, could you read the motion?
Yes, the administration recommends that the Board of School Directors approve the following change orders. New middle school construction, 1860 West Montgomery Avenue, preliminary site work construction, Watts Services LLC. That is change order number 002 for an increase in the amount of $240,000 per the attachment.
Parking lot modifications, Welsh Valley Middle School, general construction, S.J. Thomas Company, Inc., change order number 5 for landscaping, add alternate number 2 for an increase in the amount of $12,223.65 per the attachment.
Are there any questions or comments?
I have a question or comment, Ms. Klein, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So because it is 2 issues, I do support the site work at 1860. That is not a concern of mine, but I do have concerns about the plantings at Welsh Valley. So let me run through this statement and hopefully explain why I feel this way. My first reason for being reluctant to approve this is that we never discussed the importance of buses. This planting proposal assumes that buses are bad and therefore must be screened from public view. Assuming that this aspect of providing a bus fleet to this community is a burden that must be buffered, it is only this aspect of busing that ever gets discussed. The conversation is always on how buses are a burden to the community and never an asset. This board filed a lawsuit in part to allow the legal practice of having buses drive on the public road of North Stone Ridge Lane allowed. The position taken by a majority of the Board of Commissioners as well as township staff was to block buses because driving them on a public road would be a burden. Now we are discussing the fact that parking buses is also a burden that must be buffered. We never have a full conversation on the whole picture of buses. We never talk about how busing reduces traffic congestion in contradiction of people suggesting that parked buses increase traffic. We never talk about how busing assists homes that have one or zero cars to transport their students. We never discuss how busing supports after-school athletics as well as after-school science, language, and other activities by our secondary students. We always begin and end this conversation on the negative impact of busing and never move on from there. However, whether we should have a full conversation about buses and the pros and possible cons they present as community is a secondary point for me tonight. My main point is the absence of having a comprehensive position from the Board of Commissioners and the township staff and how best to move this community forward. It is this inability to have a full conversation now about important issues such as how to achieve a full athletic field plan for the new middle school that causes me to vote no today on that singular issue. It is my opinion that the litigation between the township and Lmsb over 1835 County Line Road and 1800 Montgomery Avenue will continue. I believe we will have a 3rd lawsuit over the construction of the new middle school campus, despite the fact we just approved $60 million more in borrowing. We're going to have more litigation. As Lmsb is preparing its preliminary plan for the athletic fields at 1835 County Line Road and 1800 Montgomery Avenue, it will be difficult, not impossible, to meet the township's code on compensatory trees. That law basically states that Lmsb must plant trees on those 13 acres at that site to replace or compensate for the trees that must be removed to make room for athletic fields, driveways, and parking lots. Given the plan is focused on building athletic fields, it is impossible for Lmsb to reconfigure all the various athletic fields to accept trees smack dab in the middle. In short, it is possible that Lmsb will not be able to build the athletic fields to support our middle school students, but will be pressured by the township using this law to build less fields in support of planting trees, or perhaps argue again about the alleged burden of buses traveling North Stone Ridge Lane, or some other aspect of lawsuit number 2. When asked about the compensatory trees, Commissioner Gavin, who is the ward commissioner of the area, parents' position is to not allow for trees to be planted anywhere else in the township, so as to have some form of leverage over the district at the preliminary plan stage of the new athletic fields. I really admit my information on Mr. Gavin's position could be wrong, but in my defense, it is only this hearsay statement we as a community have today. There's been no public position taken by Mr. Gavin, township staff, or the full Board of Commissioners as to allowing all the trees being planted to buffer buses at Welsh Valley as an offset to assist in getting the athletic fields at 1835 and 1800 completed. There's been no public position taken by Mr. Gavin, township staff, or the full Board of Commissioners that completing this new middle school with the athletic fields is a higher priority to this community over additional lawsuits. No one today knows how this will unfold in the near future. Before we go on to trashing me on Facebook, please allow me to remind everyone the recent history of the Board of Commissioners. I would ask you to justify how the Board of Commissioners at the 11th hour of the preliminary plan stage for the new middle school at 1860 would extort $500,000 from taxpayers via Lmsb to support off-site improvements at the intersection Spring Mill Road and Montgomery Avenue, direct contradiction of Section 503, capital A, small b of the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code. Please justify the Board of Commissioners could twist the language of its own provision of 13527A, that is a street arrangement and layout code provision, into a prohibitive use provision to block bus access. Please justify to me how these structures at 1835 and 1800 became magically historic overnight, having never gone through the process of designating them as historic. Please justify how the township commissioners could give godlike status to the homesteads, such that their artificial steep slopes became natural features in an effort to block the construction of athletic fields for middle schools. If you truly believe the history of the Board of Commissioners is not only justifiable, but evidence of a body that has consistently proven itself to be reasonable when it comes to school construction projects, well then please correct me first and then criticize me second. But please don't ignore this history as though it never happened. And please don't criticize me for being wary of this group when this is the behavior as a community we have come to expect and apparently embrace from some of our commissioners and the township staff. It is from this position of wariness in which I would prefer to spend the additional $12,000 on buffering, on top of the $9,000 already spent on Welsh Valley, in a way where we can avoid litigation and simply get the middle school and athletic fields built. I'm not asking to hold this buffering as a proverbial hostage to get what this community needs in the way of a complete middle school with necessary athletic fields. This board shouldn't ever have to do that. But then again, why has this board had to sue the township not once, but twice to do what is right and for the greater good of this community in getting a complete middle school campus built? My vote is a vote of no, not now, and not a vote of no, not never. As the fall planting season is about to end, we could delay this decision until the spring of 2021. If we did, we could have a comprehensive discussion of a compensatory tree provision as it relates to the new athletic fields and to these additional trees at Welsh Valley Middle School together. Let it be recognized that Lmsb is willing to use taxpayer money to plant trees and needs to have a complete contingent of athletic fields built. Let's have that discussion before we commit any more money on something that's likely to be forgotten or simply ignored in the coming months when Lmsb must go to the township for preliminary plan on athletic fields. I do expect to be on the losing side of this vote tonight, and on a personal note, that is not a total loss for me. Planting trees where it makes sense from both the code and aesthetics point of view is a beneficial use of taxpayer money that I can support. Forcing trees where they cannot fit to block construction of athletic fields to then instigate a lawsuit is the direct opposite of where I stand. That is a waste of taxpayer money, and I am strongly opposed to it. For the residents of Penn Valley, your civic association has been very, very helpful, civil, and understanding in this process. For that, I am grateful. Despite what will be written about me in social media, this is not me blindly going against yet another civic association in the community. I wish all relationships with civics were this cordial. Should this board vote to plant these additional trees and shrubs, I ask those residents around Welsh Valley to come to future Board of Commissioner meetings when Lmsb is presenting its preliminary plans for 1835 and 1800. I would ask you to remind all the commissioners and township staff of this vote today. I do not have the dates of those meetings, but they should be calendared soon. I do hope those residents go to the township meetings like you did this evening. I do hope you speak, and I hope you are heard. But most importantly, I hope I am actually wrong. I hope this community can complete the middle school campus without unnecessary lawsuits and wasting of taxpayer money, despite having no assurances tonight and a very recent history that contradicts that goal. For these reasons, I am voting no, in the fact that we cannot have a comprehensive discussion on how to maintain all the facilities we need in Lower Merion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do have a procedural question on whether we should separate out the two bills. I don't know if Mr. Orlando or Mr. Copeland can answer that.
I think it's really a Mr. Roos question. In
Mr.
other words,
Yeah.
separate out the two purchases.
Right, I don't know if that's necessary or not.
It's not.
Yeah.
Mr. Driscoll can simply state he supports what he supports and what he doesn't on his vote.
Okay. Thank you. So are there any other further questions? No. Okay. So do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. So given that detail, I'm going to ask Ms. LaPera to do a roll call.
Okay. Mr.
Sorry, I
Lee?
sprung that one on you.
That's okay. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Mooring?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
I am yes to the site work and no to the Welsh Valley plantings.
Ms. Axman?
Yes.
Ms. Finger? I'm sorry, Ms. Finger?
Yes.
Ms. Kalish?
Yes.
And Ms. Klein?
Yes.
We have 8 in favor and 1 against the Welsh Valley. The motion passes.
Thank you. At this time, we will move on to a motion to approve the remainder of the agenda by consent. Are there any questions? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. The
Approved.
motion passes. Mr. Roos, can you please review the Sunshine Act?
You're muted.
Executive session last Monday night regarding personnel. There was no executive session tonight. It was simply an information session.
Thank you. And Ms. LaPera, could you please read the upcoming meeting dates?
Yes. We have October 12th, Education Committee and Supplementary Regular Board Meeting, and the October 19th Regular Business Board Meeting. Both of them are at 8 p.m. via Zoom. And the committee meeting dates are September 23rd, the Communications Meeting at 7 p.m., the September 29th Ad Hoc Equity and Anti-Racism Committee Meeting at 7 p.m., October 6th, Curriculum, October 9th, Policy, October 15th, Facilities and Purchasing, and all 3 of them are 8:30 a.m., all via Zoom. That's it.
Thank you very much. Just quickly, thank you to everyone for your time and for those folks that have stayed on this late. I appreciate that. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.